sudden he's ready for snowboarding.
Is that Alan? Hi, Alan.
Maybe the end of the week, I'll be thinking about it.
He sees that way.
I'd like to call the Town of Rocky Hill Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting to order. It's Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. First of all, I just want to make sure Alan from the North Pole can hear us. Okay. Testing.
Oh.
Alan, can you hear us?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Not again.
Hello.
Not again.
Alan? Can you say something?
His lips are moving.
Lips are moving, but we don't
Nothing.
hear him
Beauty?
at all.
No, give him like a sign. Give him a ear sign.
But we
Right,
can't
hold on.
Last
see.
time, too.
Hold on.
Hold up a sign.
It's hybrid meeting.
But we don't know whether he can see us.
Oh,
That's the thing, otherwise we can hold.
want me to call him and ask him?
I was
No.
going to.
Okay.
He should be an alternate until he
Yep.
can become a full-time member.
Yeah.
And
So we'll, I just want to
We're going to see if.
give him a minute.
Ask him to give me the thumbs up
no, just,
if he could
we're
hear
not gonna
you.
do this again.
Yeah.
No,
I
we're
think
not,
this is
no,
a-
we're not doing
Yeah,
that again.
so name the people that are gonna sit for your first one, and then we'll go forward.
Well, it's not,
Let's-
yeah, there's
let me
no
just
hearings. which
Finish,
is
see if he can, let me, wait. I just want to give IT sufficient time. You give us, let us know if this is going to work. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me in the back.
I think he's doing, someone's doing something. I think.
Yeah, somebody is doing a.
The joys of hybrid. That's why I like you. One way or the other.
He's muted.
Yeah, but I think he might be doing something. He can.
No, but Alan is muted. Now he's not muted. Now he,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Can you?
thank goodness.
Can you hear us?
Oh, yes. And I can see myself 5 times on the screen.
Good TV.
As do we.
All right.
Fine.
Okay, we're all set.
All ready? That's good.
Oh, my head.
So for today's meeting, just want to go over who will be seated. So Commissioner Zarelli, Commissioner Aglico, myself, Commissioner Morhos, and Commissioner Robbins. So I'd like to go to item second and item 2 on the agenda, public comment. This is where anyone in the public who like to address to the commission on any topics that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, we move on to item 3, consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Can I have, all in favor?
Need a second.
Oh, can I have a second?
I wasn't here.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think who was seated?
Yeah, I was seated last
Yep.
time, so I'm voting yes.
Item 4, site plan application.
Agenda item A, site plan application, Courtney Earhart, JFIV Holdings LLC and Core States Group proposing a 5,710 square foot restaurant on the site of the former Dakota's Restaurant with related site modifications for property located at 1489 Silestein Highway in RC Regional Commercial Zoning District ID 04-557.
Do we have applicant?
Hello, my name is Courtney Earhart with, CDS Development. I'm here on behalf of Longhorn Steakhouse. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to get up and explain a little bit about our project. We're happy with the chance to become part of the Rocky Hill community. The Longhorn Steakhouse. The restaurant is a full-service casual dining restaurant serving both lunch and dinner. The food prepared is always fresh, never frozen. An important item that Longhorn Steakhouse does is across the country, team members spend extra time to prepare, package, and freeze and store unserved surplus food for donation to local food banks, shelters, and other charitable organizations. Last year, those restaurants donated nearly 2 million pounds of ready-to-eat food. Since 2007, Longhorn Steakhouse has donated 12.5 pounds of food to help those in need. The project consists of the following. The square footage, the building floor area is 5,710 feet. The number of seats would be 184 dining seats. The hours of operation are 11 a.m. till 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. We hire locally for these restaurants, and we will employ approximately 100 people at this restaurant with job opportunities. The approximate number of meals we serve each day would be between 200 for lunch and 400 for dinner. And then the Longhorn Steakhouse typically has 2 trash bins for trash and recycles in their dumpster areas. For this project, we are proposing the demolition of the existing Dakota's Steakhouse. And we will come in with the new Darden building, Longhorn Steakhouse building, which is a smaller square foot. I believe the existing Dakota's building is close to 10,000 square feet. Due to restrictions with the site layout and how Longhorn would be serviced operationally with deliveries, trash pickup, things of that nature, we did our best that we could to make sure that the site functioned best for everybody, including our adjacent neighbors. As part of that, we were able to increase the overall parking. We did make some changes to the parking design. So we were able to increase the overall parking for the shared spaces for the overall development by 2, and we were also able to increase the green space of the overall development by 800 square feet. In regards to the building itself, the materials consist of stone, ephes, and hardy plank. The design of the building is based on a Western ranch house. The main entry is one of the brand identifiers with the stone pilasters that you can see on the front entry. And the maximum height of the building is 27 feet at the highest point of the tower, the entry tower. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this application, just so you know, just so the commission is aware, this application came in as a site plan at our last month's meeting, and there was a revised plan submitted, so we need to make sure we get that presentation on the revisions into the record. And I also want to note for the record that the applicant, though it was a different name, same property, but Katie Peel did apply for zoning variances with respect to the signs. So the signs you see on the plans have been approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals last evening. I just want to state that on the record.
Thank you. Would you please mind going over the differences between the last application and this thing?
Can I call up our civil engineer that's here? Okay. Most of the changes that were requested were civil related, so he's the expert on that area.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Kenny, representing Core States Group, who did the civil engineering design. this project. Since the project was last presented on for the last meeting, we have shared a detailed parking summary that outlines what we believe to be the shared parking on the site, in addition to what would be the parking for the Longhorn Steakhouse itself. And as Courtney had mentioned, the overall parking is increasing by 2 spaces, so we believe that there will be adequate parking for this establishment. We were also in receipt of comments from the engineering department and responded to those in kind. The only major addition to our plan from when we presented last month is that we added a clean out to the storm line that was leaving the front of the building per the request of the engineering department. So that was the major addition that we made to our plans, and we made sure that the full civil plan package was submitted as part of this site plan application. We had presented the full set to the Wetlands Commission, and just wanted to make sure that we also had provided this to the commission as well.
You do have the revised plans and the written comments in reply to the engineering department's comments. Those are dated July 13th of this year.
I'd like to open up comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Zarelli,
I have no questions.
Commissioner Glica.
I have one question. In reference to outdoor seating, you're not showing any here, but there is an ordinance that you could have seating, so where would you put it if you had to?
Part of the brand for Longhorn Steakhouse does not include outdoor seating, so I don't think that they would put outdoor seating at the building.
So during the pandemic, they just shut down?
They had where you would call ahead, place your orders, and you could come in and get takeout.
Okay.
During the pandemic, they did close some of their buildings. On other sites, they tried having the tables in the parking area because the building doesn't have a patio. So some locations that was able to work, it wasn't able to work across the brand, but part of their branding is that they don't have outdoor seating.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Right. Commissioner Hesse.
No questions.
Right. Commissioner Lecca.
Nothing.
I'll go to Commissioner Marhos.
I have nothing.
All right. Commissioner Robbins.
Nothing.
Commissioner Brescia.
Nope, all set.
I do not have any questions either. Anyone else? Nope. All right. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve site plan application Courtney Earhart JF4 Holdings LLC and Core States Group proposing a 5,710 square foot restaurant.
Can I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. 5-0.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Item 4B.
Agenda item B, pre-application, Vessel RE Holdings LLC for review of a possible residential development proposal under CT General Statute 8-30G for a property located at 2369
Could you
Main
turn
Street
that down a
in
little?
a Town Center zoning district ID 10-080.
Could I, if I may, before you begin, if you could please step up to the microphone. With every pre-application, there's a little spiel I do. Because it is a pre-application, what this commission can assume is this is a possible or a potential applicant looking to get some feedback on a possible project. Any information that the possible applicant would be giving to the commission is non-binding on their part. any information or questions asked on the commission. It's non-binding on the commission's part as well. I would advise the commission, they cannot state on the record, you know, I'm in favor of this, I'm against it, because that could be considered prejudging, but you certainly can give some feedback on the project, and ask questions about the project. So just keep that in mind.
All set.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman Desai, members of the Commission, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. I guess it's just gentlemen here tonight. But, my name is Ryan Hoyler. I'm from Hartford, and I'm here representing Vessel RE Holdings LLC in this pre-application review. With me tonight, bless you, I have Josh Levy from Vessel, and I also have Matthew Bruton, our civil engineer, who's helped us with the project so far. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to do this pre-application and get some feedback. The property we're talking about here is at 2369 Main Street. It is approximately 300 feet south of the intersection of Main Street and Elm Street, maybe 900, 1,000 feet southwest of where we are right now. Right now, it is a vacant property. It is 0.51 acres. It is to the immediate south of a liquor store and to the immediate north of a, if you could go actually to the next slide. Thank you, sorry. You can see the empty property on the slide here. To the right, to the north, is a liquor store. To the left, to the south, is a barber shop, restaurant, and uniform shop. This is a vacant property. It has always been vacant. Nothing has been developed here. It is directly across the street from the Ames property, which was recently approved for a new multi-use expansion, including both housing as well as retail. It is partly vegetated. There are wetlands to the rear of the site in the southwest corner. The design we have does not touch the wetlands. Part of the design will be in the upland review area, but the wetlands themselves will remain untouched in the back. We will have to go before the Wetlands Commission to get approval for the work we're going to do in the upland review area. We will also need to get an encroachment permit from the Connecticut DOT because we are on Route 99 here. We have checked, there are no endangered species at the site, and this ideally would be a site plan application only under 830G with partly 30% affordable housing. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Josh Levy, who's with Vessel, and he'll be able to walk you through what Vessel does and part of the project here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm greatly appreciative of the time and of you coming out on this blistering heat. Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, let me see. How's that? Better? I think so. Okay. So thank you for having us. We're really appreciative of the time and the opportunity. If somebody can go to the next slide. Who has that?
Oh, that IT.
Oh.
Have it. So.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Vessel and who we are and what we do, because we are somewhat different than most development companies or most housing companies. I've spent about 25 years in multifamily housing. My partner and I started Vessel a few years ago with the idea of trying to provide housing to address the need for attainability in communities. And what we mean by attainability is the idea that there are tons of people in communities like teachers or firefighters, municipal employees who don't make enough money to live in the new construction, high-end luxury buildings that are readily available in communities, but don't fit into the traditional idea of affordable housing in communities either. But there are people that live and work in the communities and that need access to high-quality housing. Slide. So our mission is to provide something that provides people with an equal opportunity to what we call an extraordinary life, knowing that housing is the foundation of people's lives and the foundation of what people are able to achieve, but also something that's excitable and sustainable and attainably priced for them. Slide. speaking a little bit about who we target, as I said before, we're targeting people in the missing middle who are community members. And so we're looking for, housing that can be attractive to young people. Usually our target demographic is 18 to 34-year-olds. We build mostly one-bedroom apartments. And we're looking for people who, want to take advantage of something that's a high-quality product, but can't afford the typical rents that are, predominantly available, especially in parts of this part of the country. Slide. So there's often a question of how do we do this? And one of the big ways we've approached this is through the productization of housing. And what I mean by that is typical development has custom designs that are new for every site, for every community. We spent the better part of 3 years on a design that was code compliant to all 50 states that would allow us, much like the advent of flat screen televisions, to bring down cost through production methods so that we could produce a higher quality product at a lower price point to the community. In doing that, we also wanted to be able to produce something that met a lot of the community's needs. And so what you're looking at here is a steel building with all the most advanced life safety systems. It's fully sprinklered, it's fully alarmed. It has all sorts of things that are specific to this building that I'll tell you about in a second. But the idea being that, we're providing something that is extraordinarily safe as well as sustainably built with sustainable materials. The exterior of the building that you saw on the previous slide was a rain screen technology. It's made from both a sustainable material, but it's also meant to increase the energy efficiency of the building and to make sure that you don't have the typical problems of construction. So if you think about typical construction using a brick facade, the pressure inside and outside of the building are never consistent. And so as you see driving rain during a rainstorm, that rain is actually driving into the building. It gets behind bricks. It pops those bricks off if you live in a climate like this one where you have contraction and expansion through freezing and thawing. If you go into a vessel unit, it's designed as a luxury housing unit, so it's 9-foot ceilings, it's floor-to-ceiling windows, but we've tried to think about things differently than everybody else does. So while the walls probably look fairly similar to a regular wall, we don't use any paint or any drywall. Everything in our building is built through a panelization system on the interior. It's made through a material that's both sustainable, it's antimicrobial, it's hypoallergenic, and it's virtually indestructible. So you don't have the kinds of problems that you have in a typical building where you have maintenance issues or mold behind inaccessible walls. And more importantly, you don't have the ongoing issues of inconveniencing tenants or not knowing about things in your most important systems, like your electrical and your plumbing. We analogize this to the idea of a car. So if we all went to buy our cars, and then we had a problem with the battery, and we brought it into the car dealership, and they said, no problem, we're going to fix the car. We're going to punch a hole in your hood. We'll pull out the battery, and then we'll send you to the body shop to fix it. We'd all think that was crazy, but in the real estate industry for decades, more than decades, we've been doing it just like that. This advances that. Everything in the unit has stainless steel appliances, washer dryers, dishwashers. We're built to universal design standards, which is a step above, ADA, so that not only is everything barrier-free entry, but we also have loads of things that are customizable to the specific tenant who's living there. So if you're 6'4" and you love to cook, the kitchen, which we call our yoga kitchen, actually has the ability to have all the different modules change height. Or if you're somebody who is not 6'4", but you have a bad back and you don't want to bend down for your dishwasher, just that module can be raised and customized to tenants' needs so that we can be available to all people with all different varying degrees of needs. All the units have hearing and visual prompts for people who are hearing and visually impaired. There's intrusion alarms. We have a number of other things associated with the units in order to enhance the living experience. They're incredibly healthy with a system that allows for 24/7 air monitoring and purification. We have bathrooms that clean themselves through UVC technology. So it's intended to be something that's, healthy, sustainably built, and super energy efficient. Slide. Talking a little bit about the technology in the building. So what we think about Vessel as is a technology-enabled housing product. What I mean by that is typical smart home technology is aftermarket. You can go buy a Nest system or something like that for your house, but it's not ever built in and intertwined in. Ours is a custom designed smart home that's specific to this building. It's built with this building and inextricably linked to it. And it does a number of things, not the least of which is prohibits problems in the building that can cause problems for tenants, neighbors, and otherwise, things like leaks behind inaccessible walls. We have a system that's tracking the water pressure in a building and can pinpoint if there's a leak in the building main or in an individual unit and automatically shut that down so you don't have mold behind walls or other problems like that. And then we have everything else that a smart home would have. You can stream music, you can get all sorts of other things in the unit with your lighting, LED lighting, all different colors. And then we have a number of things enabled to create more efficiency in your water usage as well as your energy usage. The system's going to learn the likes and dislikes of tenants, and then it gives them ideas about how they can save money. And the whole goal for us is to have the highest quality product, but keep passing along savings to tenants so that they have more money to spend in the local economy and to be able to be successful in their lives. Slide. A little bit about the sustainability. So we use all sustainable materials. We are a net zero building, so we're building to the highest levels of energy efficiency. Essentially, our building facade and the insulation is built to passive house standards so that it's super energy efficient. In addition to that, we try to minimize the negative impact on sort of the environment as we're building the buildings. These buildings, most buildings will take 18, 24 months to build. Our building takes 6 months from start to finish, and we can start delivering housing right away. It's also, most buildings will have dozens and dozens and dozens of trucks show up for all sorts of delivery. Our whole system gets delivered on a series of, up to maybe 12 trucks. The whole thing is erected in 10 days. It's minimal intrusion into the area, minimal, disturbance to the environment. Another different aspect of what we do is who is the owner and operator of our building. So Vessel is a design firm, we're a development firm, we're a management firm, but every one of our buildings is designed to have a local owner operator. So after managing tens of thousands of units of housing, what we kept seeing was that property management had moved in the wrong direction. It was bigger buildings, less centralized property management. The property managers weren't specific to the community. They didn't live in the community. That meant they didn't care about what happened there necessarily. They're also paid differently. They get paid based on the income the building makes, not based on how good the building is running or whether it's fulfilling its obligation to the community. Every one of our buildings is going to be run by somebody local to the community. We find somebody from the community who's looking for an economic opportunity, who wants to have training and have a secondary option for a job. It's a part-time job because of the efficiency of our buildings. It takes 5 to 10 hours a week for a building of this size. They'll earn all the surplus cash flow on the deal. It doesn't go to us. They also get trained through something we call Vessel University, and then we provide all the ongoing support to them and quality control and asset management because we hold the building for its life from the perspective of all the money that's been put in. It's our capital that goes into the building. So we stay inextricably linked to the success of the building as well. Slide. So, in terms of partnerships, slide. What we think about is how we can partner with communities in order to give people opportunity to live in, sustainable, healthy, energy efficient, high quality units at good pricing. And then we think about how we can empower local people through our caretaker program. Our buildings, while some of it is built off-site through panelization, all the on-site work will be done by local companies. We'll work with you on whatever your local labor goals are, whether it's just local companies or MBWB, whatever those goals are. And then, unlike most owner-operators of buildings, we look at this as a life of an asset investment. We don't sell properties. We don't leave them behind, unlike traditional private equity where people are trading in and out every 3 or 5 years. And so, they have limited ties to the community in terms of what they're doing. So, just thinking about who these people are again, what we think about is, what do people make? How can we target that? That's what we're going to target. That's what we target our rents to. Even the non-affordable units are designed to be able to be priced at levels that people, who are teachers, who are police officers, who are firefighters can afford, because we want to deliver housing to that, to that demographic and allow them to live in the communities that they serve in really wonderful places. Slide. And you probably know this already, like most markets, Rocky Hill, for, high quality product, has seen rents, go through the roof. And even in the lower quality product, that product has risen dramatically. Across the board, what we look at is how can we deliver a product that is as high quality, if not higher, that's healthier, that's more sustainable, and deliver it at lower pricing than other people are doing in the market. Slide. So this is a little bit about the site plan. I do have Matt Brudem with me, who's from BL. If it would be helpful, I can have him walk you through the site plan a little bit, and he can give you some additional information on it.
Thanks, Josh. Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Matt Brudem. I'm an engineer from BL Companies. I work out of our Hartford office. So the site plan you see here on the plan is the conceptual plan to date, based on what Vessel has told you about their program, so I'll kind of just walk you through how we envision this site. So across the bottom of the screen is obviously Main Street. Obviously the building is prominently up on the street in the lower right-hand corner to give some good street presence. There's obviously a sidewalk there currently. We would obviously look to maintain that sidewalk for accessibility and walkability, bikeability for residents, and then obviously people in the neighborhood. We do show connection from that sidewalk to the main entrance of the building to obviously promote that mode of transportation. We do show a single access driveway to Main Street, and as mentioned earlier, that would obviously require an encroachment permit from the DOT. As you come into the site, you can see the building would be placed on the right. We have the majority of the parking to the side of the building and to the rear of the building to kind of highlight the building and not really the parking. Obviously, we have handicap accessible parking spaces, benches, bike racks. That would all be kind of site amenities that would be surrounding for the residents to use. Obviously, as we progress this further, we'd be looking to add and provide more detail for the town to review. Utilities are all available to be able to support the building. We'd be providing landscaping and lighting to provide a safe but attractive site for the residents and obviously for abutters in the community. And obviously providing stormwater management plan to deal with the increase in impervious, to deal with the runoff that would be happening from the building and the parking lot. And then we'd be providing erosion and sedimentation control to deal with the construction period when earthwork is being moved around. So that's kind of a quick high-level overview of the site plan, and I'll pass it back to Josh, and happy to answer any questions or comments you guys may have on the application or the pre-review.
Ryan Wheeler again. Again, this is an ideal location. Going back to some of the notes on the previous slide, and we can keep the slide where it is. This is a 30-unit apartment. They will all be one-bedroom units. As Josh mentioned, with the way it's designed, it's very high-end. It's really kind of designed for young professionals, maybe people looking for a first place, people within the community. The units will be approximately 550 square feet of interior space, so measured interior wall to interior wall. They will all be built identically. There will be no difference between the affordable rate units and the market rate units. They will all be constructed the same. The total building height will be 5 stories, approximately 55 feet. If you can actually go back to slide 7, I think that's probably the best view of the building we have. You can see here on this slide, and just as a point of reference, while the building is up against the north side of the property here, the closest building on that side is the liquor store to the north. It's over 60 feet away. There's a huge parking lot in the middle there. I guess we're going to stay on the slide. That's okay. But you can see on slide 7 in the packet you have the conceptual design of what the building will look like from the exterior. And again, the location is really ideal. It's it's right in the middle of kind of the town center area. It's very walkable. There's a sidewalk already along Main Street there. There are crosswalks at the Elm Street and Main Street intersection that will allow people living here to walk pretty much anywhere in the town center area. And again, it is directly across the street from the Ames development. And it's just a fantastic location. There are 2 bus stops right at the Elm and Main Street intersection. Both of those are commuter buses. They will bring residents right into Hartford if they're commuting into Hartford. And with the parking situation we have here with 30 spots, we have 1 per vehicle. For a 1-bedroom apartment, that should be more than enough. And, you know, again, this is a pre-application review, so we're really here tonight to get your feedback, any thoughts you might have, if there are changes you want us to make before we come before you with an official application. Feel free to ask any questions to me, to Josh, to Matt. We're more than welcome to answer any questions, and if you have anything that you want to follow up with us, you know, after this hearing, we'd be more than welcome to answer anything in writing later on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Start with Commissioner Zurelli.
The first question that I would have is, it's a very modern-looking building. We went through why it's modern-looking, but is there an opportunity for a change in the modern look to more of a look that would, let me go back, that in the town center, we have a section in our regulations 4E that we have to go by for our town center. There's design standards, I'm assuming you guys know about it because you're applying for the town center. One of the big things we need to consider is the look of the building and how it's gonna match the character of the zone, as well as the movability, pedestrian-friendly, all the other stuff that we have to consider. So I just wanna make sure that you're aware of section 4E of the regulations, I'm assuming, but I just wanna make sure. And talk to us about the actual design of the building. And one of the things we're gonna look at going forward, if you come for a site plan.
Yeah, so the things that, the easiest thing to change in the building is the color of it, which, you know, certainly can have a dramatic impact on the building itself. This is a white building that obviously looks more, or the most modern out of any color, just because white tends to look the most modern. The building itself comes in a wide variety of colors, so in New London, we're doing a similar installation in gray in an area in order to fit the surrounding area. I was in Glastonbury this morning, and they asked to see it in tan in order to fit the area a little bit better. So we certainly can do that. I'm happy to work with staff or whoever else on showing them color samples, and could also forward the color samples by email to the board if you'd like to see them. We're happy to have the input. And then, you know, of course, we can, you know, do things to soften the building with landscaping. You know, right now we have, you know, some grasses and other things shown in the rendering, but, you know, to soften it, we could have, you know, sort of like specimen trees and things like that, which have, you know, as you know, I mean, a big impact on sort of the look and feel of the property itself. So we're always open to and flexible with anything we can change in order to try to meet the needs of the surrounding community.
I'll let everybody else ask questions, so I'll
All
stop
right.
now.
Just a couple of questions. Looking at this, it's hard to tell, so is it on a slab?
It's slab on grade foundation, that's correct.
So 5 floors?
Slab.
I'm assuming there's gonna be an elevator?
There is an elevator, yes.
Is there a rear exit?
Yes, there is a rear exit. The elevator itself is also a self-evacuating elevator backed up on generator power to aid for ingress and egress purposes.
Okay, and is there any built in the area? I know you mentioned Glastonbury, New London, but
The first building in Connecticut will be in New London. We're about to break ground on that one right now. So that would be that's going to be our first standing building in Connecticut.
okay. Last question is 30 parking spaces. I know you said it's 1 bedroom, but you could have two people living in one bedroom. So-
Certainly, you could have two in a one-bedroom unit.
So that means you could actually have 2 cars per unit.
We have not seen in any of our buildings, whether our old conventional buildings or otherwise, where one bedrooms of this size where you have multiple cars in these kinds of units. In fact, in some instances, we've seen that, some of the tenants don't have cars themselves. Certainly, we can ask Matt to look at the site plan and see if there's a way to get a couple of extra spots in to increase the parking count. We're happy to do whatever we can to accommodate more parking.
Would the
on site.
parking be allocated per unit, or is it?
Yeah, generally, we like to allocate per unit so that people have a designated spot if they have a car. And then what we'll do is, if people are away, there's the ability for, guests to use that spot when they're not there for those purposes.
Because this area wouldn't accommodate on-street parking.
No,
It's just
yeah.
too busy. So that would be the next question, visitor parking. I know that was brought up by staff.
Yeah, I mean, what we have generally found in terms of our parking and traffic analyses is that the amount of guests in a building like this, where the units are 550 square feet and they're all one bedrooms, is balanced by people who are there or not there. That there's never 30 units that are available, that are, fully occupied with guests all in the units, that people are going and coming for those purposes. Somebody, actually, I don't know if anybody asked this also, and whether this is a goal of the community, we're happy to also, in some of the spaces, have charging stations, if that's something that's important to the board as well. But we can certainly look and see if Matt can pull a couple more spaces in to see if there's the opportunity for some additional parking, for some flex parking.
Good.
I would just add, another one of the location of this building is very important, and it does have those 2 bus stops that are commuter bus stops right there at Elm and Main. And we're hopeful that at least some of the residents will be able to use those commuter buses as their day-to-day transport.
Commissioner Hesse?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Following up with Commissioner Glico a little bit on the parking. Obviously, it'll be tight. Any thoughts on a designated snow area? Not sure what you do if you haul things out, but it's going to be tight with parking, so you get a really bad blizzard. Is it intended to kind of haul that off right away, or are you envisioning a spot to accumulate a snow pile?
Yeah, I mean, typically, with a standard storm, we'd be using the landscaped areas on the perimeter of the site plan as snow storage. Obviously, growing up in New England, living here too, if there's a huge blizzard, we'd be looking at, off-site hauling options to make sure that all the spaces are applicable and usable for all the residents.
Okay. But is there a way, obviously, the egress point is on the south side of the building. Is there a way to give us an idea in terms of where that egress point is in relation to the old Ames building, the new development that's coming in terms of traffic and lights that could be going on there and potential problems? Is there a way to kind of give us an idea with the new development coming in?
If you go to the next slide, it'll show just generally where the building is. Obviously, it's going to be on the south side. The entrance is going to be on the south side of that lot. And the Ames property is directly across the street. The intersection of Elm and Main is approximately 300 feet to the north. You obviously have lights at that intersection. The next intersection is to the south. I believe that is an unsignaled intersection where the barber shop, and I think it's a CVS down there, is.
Signalized.
So the,
Certainly create a plan that shows that as well.
Yeah, because obviously we have it approved as such, so in terms of where that egress point is with your egress point, just to kind of see, I mean, we can see where the existing ones are, but in terms of where the current proposed ones would be in relation to where yours is, it would be good to kind of identify where they kind of line up.
yeah, we can
Yeah,
coordinate that.
we get a copy of the approved plan from town staff. We
Yeah.
can certainly pose them on each other to give you guys that perspective.
Okay. Last question I had in terms of I don't really think you had touched on it. Maybe at this point, you don't really have a designated amount, but just for curiosity's sake, rental pricing, where does that typically fall? I mean, there's a lot that you said about it, and I'm just kind of curious
Yeah,
as to where.
We try to target about 1450.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, that's where we try to target. Obviously, everything changes unfortunately
Absolutely.
day to day right now with the way pricing on goods and services are
Yeah,
going,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's always our target. In areas where we don't have a specific affordability set aside, we try to start lower, actually. If we have to blend, we have to look at the blending of
Okay.
the units.
All right, thank you.
And then, of course, the 30% of affordable units would be based on the calculations based on the HUD.
Correct.
numbers, things
Yep,
like that.
yep. All right, all set, thank you.
Commissioner Lecco?
Yeah, a couple questions, a couple comments, things to consider. First of all, would this be considered the smallest building that you've done, or close to the smallest, or can you go smaller?
So our buildings are usually 30 to 60 units. We try to not go too much bigger than that. So this is our smallest size building,
Okay.
but we do have other sites that are the same size.
Okay.
In terms of the 30 units.
Okay, good. And with regards to parking, it seems to be a common theme. Have you approached the owner of the liquor store and about a possible overflow parking arrangement, or shared parking, or shared driveway, or anything like that?
I have not, but certainly something I'd be happy to do. In terms of that, would never hurts to ask,
Yeah.
the next door neighbor. So yeah, definitely we'd be happy to do that, and we can do that in advance of the next step of the
Because that's gonna be that's an additional curb cut, that's quite a few curb cuts between Elm Street and Garden, so.
Yeah, we can certainly ask them about that. That would be, that'll work fine. So we'll reach out.
Okay. And one more question. And the Wetlands Commission will probably bring this up, but stormwater runoff, pre and post, and that could be difficult, it could be a challenge here. But one thing to consider is a green roof. Have you used green roofs on these structures, and is that feasible here?
So our roofs are solar, because in order to make the building net zero. But we do use all pervious paver materials for parking, and Matt can tell you all about the restaurant one.
Yeah, so obviously it's a small site with not a lot of extra landscaping for an above ground base, and so what we typically do is try to minimize the pervious area or impervious area by using pervious pavers and pavement to, maximize the amount of groundwater that can recharge and be captured. So we would do an underground system that would, match the pre and post town regulations for the 2 up to the 100-year. We provide obviously a report that would detail and show the grading and drainage, structures that would hit the TSS removal and all of those sorts of standards that the Connecticut Stormwater Manual lays out.
Okay. And one quick question. Is this in a flood zone? Is that a stream that's on the south side?
Yeah, I don't believe it is. I can double check. But the wetlands that's along that boundary.
Yeah, the southern boundary.
Yeah, it's basically its greatest significance is for conveyance from the adjacent residents behind that flow down into this property, are captured currently by a culvert that then go under the main street towards the Ames property. So conveyance is really the biggest benefit of that wetland, which we'd obviously continue to let flow down through our property, post-development with vessel. So that would be part of the drainage analysis and design as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Commissioner Mahos.
Yeah, I have some things. You say in one of your write-ups here that you're going to be asking for a zone change and a zoning map change. What exactly are you looking for, and what are the reasons for
I
them?
believe that might have been in the authorization letter we had the applicant sign for our permission to put this in. Now that we've been thinking about this and have gone through it with the applicant more, because of the small size, it will probably just, in all instances, it will just be a site plan application. There will not be a zone text amendment. There will not be a zone map change.
Okay, along those lines, I believe, I may be wrong, that the height limit in that zone is 45 feet, and you're saying your building is going to be 55 feet.
Correct. We would be applying under 830G, which would allow us to kind of work around some of the height limits and the regulations, although obviously we would want to continue working with the commission here to ensure that whatever height that we do have is going to be something that works for the commission, works with the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay. Just an aside, I lived in apartments for like 35 years or so. You've got in-wall music. Do you have any issues with that carrying into an adjacent apartment?
No, our buildings, because of the level of insulation that's both in the walls and in the floors, as well as the steel construction, have noise attenuation that's akin to high-end condo buildings as opposed to rentals, and so you can't hear anything from unit to unit.
Okay.
Or outside the building.
Now, obviously, everybody's mentioned it. I think the parking is very, very short. You may have, you're going to have more than a couple of people that have two cars in an apartment. And then on Friday night, people are going to have people visiting, and it could be issues. And this is just my observation. I wouldn't count on too many residents relying strictly on public transportation. I'd bet that pretty much everybody has a car, at least one. So keep that in mind. And then one last thing, this would be for Kim. When this comes in as an application, could we get an inventory of the number of 5-story buildings in the town of Rocky Hill? I'm trying to think, and I can't recall one that I can come up with, but that'd be something. I mean, obviously this is a pre-application review, so that would be something that I think we should have available to us when this comes in formally.
I would just state for the record that, once again, this is a pre-application.
Correct.
If and when an application does come in, we will address the application when it comes in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think I know Commissioner Bresch is going to bring this up. There's 2 handicap spots. She could probably tell us how many we're supposed to have in a building of that size, but that's all for me. I took away your thunder.
Before we go on, I just want to point out, reminding the commission and also to the possible applicant that our parking regulations have been changed in keeping with more recent legislation. So with respect to multifamily, we have a regulation that now states that we cannot, where is it? Hang on. Took effect 1/26/22 for multifamily dwellings, minimum spaces. So the minimum spaces is not to exceed 1 space per studio or 1-bedroom unit. So that's our minimum.
Okay. One more question. Somewhere in here too, I read through that property is going to be sold to you or to someone else before this actually comes in as an application. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. There's 2 aspects probably that you looked at. One was that we are buying the property from somebody, and they've given us permission to submit the application, and so we will buy the property from them. And then the other part was that our properties, while we continue to own them, are operated by what we call a caretaker, who is somebody who's local to the community that we bring in to the property to be the operator of the property.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robbins?
Okay, thanks. So on your zoning map, you list the zone as commercial, but it's town center, village district.
Yes, that's something we'll have to fix in the zone map. It is listed in the town assessor's record under the tax assessor's office as being in the commercial zone. However, the town zone map does show it on the edge of the town center zone.
Oh, okay. So when you were developing your proposed site plan, did you do a comparison to the requirements within the town center district? And
Yes, I think the site plan has a table in it that has a chart that shows the differences. If I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
It does, yeah. I'm not sure how recent it was updated. If you want to go back to that slide, I'm not sure what page it is.
To answer the question, it shows the differences between the commercial zone and the proposed zone. When we come in with this, we will obviously have to update that with the differences between the town center zone and the proposed zone.
Okay. So with that said, residential is allowed in the town center district when it's combined with a mixed use. So what's the mixed use?
So can I suggest one thing? We're going back and forth. Please state your name so that people who are watching at home, they know who you are.
Apologies, this is Ryan Hoyler again. Again, we would be coming in under 830G, so this would be a full housing project. There would not be a retail use on the ground floor level.
Okay, so when you say you're coming in under 830G,
So 830G, under 830G, we are allowed to submit a site plan for just a residential application in a site like this and use the 830G rules to move it forward. So
Housing.
oh, okay. So actually, this becomes a question more for Kim. In that scenario, is so that we can provide effective feedback on their pre-application. How would you assess compatibility with our zoning regulations if the proposal come in under
They have the
830G?
right under the state law to apply for this because of affordable housing.
To apply, but you know, as we sit here, you know, we're looking at our zoning regulations and all the considerations that go into a building that gets proposed within the town center district.
Well, right now, we're not getting into the 830G.
Yeah, I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, I just, because, you know, the other questions I have is that, for instance, you've got the building is in the ballpark of 5 to 7 feet from the curb cut.
Correct.
In the front.
that was actually done in response, I believe, to staff comments. It was originally further back, and staff comments asked us to bring it further up front so that it could have a more town center feel, so that it could be closer to the sidewalk and something like a building that you walk by as opposed to a building that's set back.
Okay.
But if there's feedback on something like that, we'd be happy. Of
course.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just, when we had put together the town center district regulations, the connectivity to the street was associated with mixed use, so that people who are walking down the street can step into a restaurant to connect, you know, so that it creates that connectivity. Whereas this is gonna be residential, so you're gonna go commercial, residential, commercial.
Correct.
So it kind of loses that connectivity to the street. And that's where the exception rule comes in, where we could say, well, you can change the setbacks.
Absolutely.
If we can meet the principles of, in the intent of what that, you know, there's an advantage to the design.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the, and again, I don't want to get too much into 830G here tonight, but, you know, one of the things that is part of an 830G application is that ideally, we work with the commission to come up with these changes that will make the plan still work, but that we can fit the changes that the commission wants into the plan. So again, if the feedback tonight is that you would want it maybe further back from the street because it's a residential building and therefore that connectivity issue is not necessarily there for that building, then that's something we can certainly look at as part of the plan and think about moving it further back.
Absolutely, and we're happy to also keep speaking with Kim, so if you have comments that, you know.
Again, can I please make sure whoever is speaking,
Oh, yes, sorry,
please
sir.
identify
I apologize.
yourself because
I apologize, yeah. So this is Josh Levy. What I was saying to Mr. Robbins is that we can, if there's comments like that this evening, we're happy to take them into account and look at them, prior to submitting a plan. Also, if, there are ideas that come up post this meeting that you filter through Kim, we're happy to, continue to speak with her and accumulate the comments so that we can address them with BL as we look at the site.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the other question I have is, under supplemental considerations on a site plan, the effect of light on the adjacent property owners is a consideration, and
We will have
with that
no
five-story structure.
We don't have any lights on the building?
No, the effect of
Blocking.
visible light. In other words, there's a chance that the adjacent property to the south is gonna be in the shade of this
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking-
55-foot building, which could in effect increase the heating costs to the adjacent property owner. And there's also the consideration of you're looking for a text variance to the side yard setback that might affect the adjacent property owner. So, all of these things are the things we have to take into consideration under supplemental considerations for a site plan. So that building's effect on the buildings that exist, is important to mitigate those impacts so that the adjacent property owners don't suffer from this development, right? The other thing question was you have it as a 50-foot upland review, but shouldn't it be 100 feet?
They actually, on their plan, they show two lines. The first one is a 50-foot upland review, and the second one is a 100-foot upland review. And our wetlands upland review, which is not part of this commission, but the wetlands review it's 100-foot.
Yeah, so the more prominent line that's cutting through the building, that's the 100-foot upland review area line, so.
Okay.
When and if they do apply, there will have to be an application before wetlands, and the Wetlands Commission will have to render their decision first.
And then the other question I have is, so if you meet the minimum requirements under the new rules with the state, one parking spot per one-bedroom unit, where would visitors park?
Again, this is Ryan Hoyler. Part of the design of the building, again, is that with these one-bedroom units, there tend not to be as many visitors. And often the experience that Vessel has with operating its buildings, there usually is parking available. However, as we've mentioned, we will look to see if there's additional parking that we can add to the site plan after tonight based on the comments we've received.
Okay. Is there a place that you've considered for trash storage and an enclosure?
Yes, this is Josh Levy. There is a trash enclosure and storage on the site. So we have a custom system that actually, you can't see where I'm pointing right now, but slides in right next to the building in the area that has the pavement in it. So I don't know how to show this to you. That's the south? The southwest area.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll pass it on to my colleague to the right here.
Well, you guys said it all, right? So those of you who have been here as long as I have, I feel old, fondly know this place is the Weeds. Anybody else? Yeah, yes, we fondly know this place is the Weeds. So my questions, pretty much everyone answered that. Setback to the street, answered that. What about storage? Because when people move in, sometimes they're gonna have storage. And if you only have like 500 square feet in a little room.
We have ample storage in the units, meaning we have as much closet space and another storage space, if not more, than a typical unit of the same kind. We've taken painstaking studies in order to make sure we have the right amount of linear and cubic storage in all of the units. We don't provide like storage rooms or storage lockers. We think that that's better, for off-site purposes if people have that much stuff for purposes of storing large items.
Okay. I think I like the bottom floor to be some nice shops and stuff. Maybe you can think about that.
Yeah.
So if you're looking towards, making this part of what the town center's concept is, I'm not sure we have any 5-story buildings in the town center. I would take a look at providing some bike racks, because you want people to be riding bicycles and having safe walkways that are well lit. Especially the back of that building, you want it well lit for people that are accessing it through the rear. Any outside seating or places where people can have like a little bench to sit on sometimes might be great, especially near the handicap parking spaces once people access. In my experiences with handicap parking, you have someone who needs a little bit of support or home care services, you're always going to need an extra parking space for that person. So I kind of think in my mind that if I see some handicapped people come on board, and you're going to probably want to offer them first floor if they can, that you would also have an extra space for visiting nurses, home care, attendants, whatnot. So that's what I would suggest you look at.
Yeah, so just so you know, we do have bike racks. Town staff was nice enough to tell us that ahead of time, and a bench for people to sit on, and all of the units are both ADA accessible and designed to universal accessibility standards. And because of the elevator, anybody could live on any floor. Every unit is exactly the same in that respect. So
Yeah, but if the elevator goes kafooey, then you got nothing.
elevators backup generated and self-evacuating.
And
It's,
do you have like an elevator room, separate elevator room and all that stuff, or? You
yeah,
do?
everything is.
The big elevator, right? Huge, so it fits lots of stuff in it?
Well, yeah,
Big.
plenty of space for,
Plenty of space.
for everything. Everything's designed for in order to allow for that kind of accessibility in the
Okay.
building.
And you said everything's ADA accessible in size, so are the tubs inset too, so they don't have to,
Showers, no tubs.
showers, are the showers inset into the ground level so they don't have to go over a lip?
Yeah.
I'd like to check it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it pet friendly?
Yeah.
So you're allowing pets?
We do allow pets. I mean, we have some restrictions on pets. It
Oh,
depends what kind.
okay. I
But
mean,
yes, pets.
Do you have an area where they're going to be able to go and do pet duty?
We don't generally put like an area on the site for pets. We've done that at other buildings before. We have found that it's not great for the building or anything else, that it ends up being something that is a detractor for the building as a whole. But yeah, so not generally.
Where do the pets go?
What I do is I walk my dog.
Okay. Okay. But just because it's a busy street there too, it's a busy area, so my guess is your pet owners are gonna go around the back of the building. That's my guess. But I would just consider something pet friendly to help out with pets, because they have to go. You said the roofs are solar?
Mhm.
Okay, so, and I've never seen 100% solar roof on these 5 stories, so I'm sure you're gonna be speaking with the fire department or the fire marshal just to kind of give them information on that, so that we
Oh, yeah,
all
absolutely.
know more about that.
And the building is all steel,
It's-
it's non-combustible and fully sprinklered and
It's a
alarmed.
flat roof?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, because I don't like solar roofs. What is your buffer on the right side between the package store and your building? Is there a buffer?
Matt Bruton from BL. On the right-hand side, you can see in the lower right-hand corner, there's a dimension there. I think it's around 4.5 feet, if I can read that correctly on this screen. So that building wall that faces the liquor store to the right-hand side, we're about 4.5, 5 feet off that property line. I believe mentioned before, the actual liquor building is 60 feet away from this building.
Are you gonna put like a sidewalk there or some sort of?
There's no,
buffer, trees?
there's no entrances on that side of the building. So the other sides of the building where there's potential entrances, we do have sidewalks adjacent to the facade and the parking. But that area that does not have a sidewalk would have some landscaping.
Okay. Yeah, I like sidewalks all the way around, because then you could walk all the way around your building like 50 times, and that would be, kind of some exercise.
Yeah, but then
there.
people can look in your window, right? So.
Yeah. And how about on the left side then? Are you taking down all those trees?
Yes, so there would be, obviously, if you can see, it's a rough kind of wavy gray line that moves to the center.
I can't read that.
Yeah,
That's-
okay. Yeah, so there are trees that would be coming down as part of this development to create
all the
space.
trees, like I see this picture, and I see all the trees, so all those trees
Yeah,
will
not
come down?
not every tree on the site will be cut down, but the majority of the trees will be cut down. It's obviously quite a small lot, so to make room for the development and the associated parking and stormwater improvements, the majority of the trees would be cut down, some would be saved, and we'd obviously be planting landscaping again to fit the design to make it an attractive place to live.
In the sidewalk in the front, right now it's a regular sidewalk. Do you plan on doing the nice brick that you have on this picture?
So I think what we're showing there is actually, sorry, Josh Levy. I think what we're showing there, I don't have it in front of me, is actually
This.
Are you talking to the left?
The brick right around the front, right in the front?
I don't see any brick.
We need to keep in mind,
Neighbors?
this isn't a
What
site
is that?
plan application. This is a proposal.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know if this was kind of like a similar
Informally.
design that you were looking at.
Yeah, no, it is. What I see here is that's just a
What's that?
that's just a regular sidewalk. What you see in terms of the driveway to the left is the pervious pavers.
Okay, because the sidewalk is white. That's in front.
Oh, that's showing just the delineation of curbs, so that you can see the curbs better.
Part of your mission here that you say is that you're trying to design health and wellness in terms of your priorities. What kind of wellness things are you promoting?
Oh, so the units all have 24/7 air monitoring and purification. All the air that's coming in goes through a monitoring system, then goes through HEPA filters and purifiers. All the materials that we use are healthy, antimicrobial, hypoallergenic materials. We have UVC technology that sterilizes all the bathrooms. We have Cyrillic lighting in the units. We have there's just a number of other things associated with the individual units as a whole in order to optimize the health of the tenants in the building itself.
And you also promote security also as one of your principles. So how are you going to be securing this building?
So the building has a number of different things. All the individual units have their own individual intrusion alarms. And then the building at the front has a controlled access gate that links to all the individual units so that you can see and hear the people before they come into the units, into the building for purposes of that. The building itself also from a safety perspective is fully alarmed, and we have then all sorts of other prompts and things like that in the units for people who are both hearing and visually impaired.
Do you have call alarms in each of the apartments or buttons, panic buttons or anything?
No.
Oh.
I mean, you can control, the system links to the smart home system links to your phone like a lot of other things through an app, so you could always utilize your phone in that way.
And then I would just make sure you talk it over with fire in terms of where your standpipes are and hydrants so that everything's accessible. Is that glass where the stairway is?
No, it's actually a textile fabric that allows for the passage of air in between it so that it helps do a couple of things. One is create a thermal chimney in the building.
Okay.
And the other thing is it brings fresh air into the building. You can't get water or other things during the weather.
Can I have?
So the driveway it's only one way in and one way out, right?
Yes.
So it's gonna be hard to turn around any emergency apparatus.
The site plan's not in front of me anymore. But if we go to it, what slide? 17? Slide 17.
Can you change it from there or no? You cannot,
No.
they had a remote or something. There should be a remote or something, or keyboard,
I mean,
or keyboard or something, is that,
He's getting there.
I mean, the goal obviously, oh, there it is. You know, the goal obviously is a 24-foot drive aisle for access in and out of the building. We do show, you know, access on two sides. You know, would be obviously working with the fire marshal or the, you know,
Yeah, 'cause
fire department to.
That turning radius looks kind of tight there, when you're going around the back, that turning radius.
Just so you know, when and if an application comes in, we typically do staff review meetings with the various departments, so, but this is not, we're not getting into that
Yep, so
level
I-
of detail right now.
I think, and again, the parking spaces, that would be the big thing. I think you need, you know, to take a look at the parking and especially try to see if you can get some more in there. But that's it.
Thank you.
thank you. I just have a couple, and this is just clarification for the commission members as well as the general public who is, you know, listening to the meeting. So the first thing is, it is said, you know, this will come under site plan approval. And this location is within the town center. So how does the requirements of town center does not fall into under 8-30G? Just general, I mean, I'm not asking to get into details, but this, I think, a lot of people who are looking at the meeting right now, they must be scratching their head and trying to understand. So, Kim, I don't know if you want to clarify, or maybe we can,
Well, yeah, I'm,
yeah,
under the statutes of Section 830G, that's a, I mean, I can say it's a whole different animal as far as affordable housing goes. And when I wrote down something, when and if this does come in as an application, I would give a very detailed explanation of Section 830G of the statutes with respect to do's and don'ts, because a lot of what commission members have been asking as far as town center zone, as far as height, as far as some of the setbacks goes, some of these things are within affordable housing application, of which this would be considered under 830G. Things are kind of out the window. And then the commission has to review it under the site plan process, and they have to do so with respect to our site plan criteria. So it's more of an administrative process. It meets the site plan regulations or it does not, that type of thing.
But Kim, that creates a catch-22 for us, because our site plan applications tell us to look back at the district.
Keep in mind, there's no application pending. I've been
Yeah.
asked a question, I'm hoping to answer the question. And when and if an application does come in, you will have a very detailed explanation about what 830G is. I don't know if Ryan wants to step in and talk more about it, but it goes to the approval process, and it goes to, should the commission act certain ways on a possible 830G application. I'm talking about if there was an application before us. If the commission were to, say, deny an 830G application, the onus in court typically is on an applicant to prove why it should have been approved. But if the commission were to, say, deny an 830G application, the onus is now on the town to say why you denied it, and it's with respect to affordable housing and what the town has already done with respect to affordable housing. So there's a lot more to it than
Thank
what
you.
I'm even saying right now, but
Right.
I'm trying not to go into great detail because there is no application before us right now.
right, and thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody
Yeah.
on the commission and.
Yeah, it's
general
a very
public,
different, it's a very different.
Different animal.
We have never had an 830G application before us, and we still don't, so.
So I think it is.
I'm trying to,
I
I'm
think I
trying to
would-
convey that, you know, this is not an application, so.
And I think what I would recommend is maybe after the meeting, you could send us,
Yes.
8-30G
Yeah.
statute, so people can get familiar with what that animal is, and, you know. But if you want to add anything, go ahead.
Again, this is Ryan Hoyler. I really don't want to add anything, just because, again, there's not an application in front
Right,
of
it's
the
really-
commission
it's
here. And
really-
I don't want to really go into details about, you know, specific things on an application that doesn't exist yet. So I appreciate that, and I defer to Kim's explanation so far.
All right, thank you.
Which is
The
vague.
other question was, is there, I mean, because we only see two sides of the building. We don't see the other two. Is there a possibility of making the frontage so that, you know, you don't see the parking? You know, I think what we are trying to do is create a center where it's nice, walkable for people and all that, rather than looking at blacktop. If they can see the building facade, which is, you know, then it helps them when they're walking and people are looking and, you know, things like that. So I don't know if there is any way of maneuvering the building. I don't know what's on the third and fourth side. Is it all windows? Is it without windows, or, you know?
I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. It sounds like two things. One is there a way to screen the parking lot a little bit so you don't see it from the street?
Right.
And I'm sure there is, it looks like there's, you know, an opportunity for, probably for some trees or something like that to screen the parking so you see less of the asphalt and then so it's screened and looks more like a downtown area where you would see street trees. For those purposes.
I think what I'm saying is more if there is a possibility of rotating the building, for example, so that you have more facade along the street and the parking is in the back, so no one can see, you know.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. I would have to defer to Matt on that. I think the issue with that is disturbing the drainage ditch area in the back and avoiding that, you know, which is why you have that sort of weird open space in the upper left-hand corner. And then, you know, the point of ingress and egress. If you didn't have the drainage ditch in the corner, I would think you could push the parking back a little bit more and therefore, you know, have less visibility at the front for purposes of the parking lot. I don't know if you have any other.
No, I mean, Matt from BL. That's kind of why we kind of shoved everything to the side and to the front. There's that wetland and that conveyance of that drainage system. Obviously, there's that environmental impact that we're trying to minimize, direct wetland impacts, and be able to continue to convey that flow from the upward neighbors through the property. So trying to be sensitive to that while also balancing the street presence and, you know, trying to get the majority of the parking to the either side or rear. So it's kind of a hard balance to do that. And that's kind of what we were trying to look at when we first started with this.
Okay. The other question is just in general, like, do you, you know, in your development provide public space, for example, where, you know, I don't know how familiar you are with the Ames project, they have the public space and things like that. So trying to mirror those things so that as we are developing this area, it jives, you know, we're not saying, you know, provide, you know, a lot of areas, but something that matches the theme that we are trying to, you know, accomplish, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would do that on a site this size, you know, in terms of public space. I think the size of the site is restrictive, obviously, to what you can do on it. I mean, if you started doing public space, you couldn't have parking and public space and everything else on a site like this. You know, that's obviously a huge site that has, I don't know, 200 and something units on it. Am I close? Is that
Yeah.
35? So it's just a, obviously a very different site, a very different animal in terms of that and what you can actually fit on the site. But certainly, it seems like there's ways to screen the asphalt areas and soften that, and we can look at things like that in order to make it feel more, more like as you're walking by.
And this is especially, I was looking at the, I think the southern corner, that corner, I don't know what, when you enter the site on the left. Is that an area where you can do something? I mean, that's a vacant area, right?
Yeah,
Nothing is being planned there.
Yeah, I think that's where, an area where you can have planting. I think, Matt and I were just, what I was pointing to him was, I think there's an opportunity to, maybe even get like a couple of more spots as well, so that we can increase the parking and things like that. So yes, I think that there's areas for planting there, and we can look at.
Yes, these are just suggestions, so you can look into that makes it a little better, and it's right across the Ames, and what we are, the ultimate goal is to make it walkable, so people can walk, people can see it, that kind of stuff, I think that's what I have, unless.
I just have a couple
Yeah.
more things. Usually the tools in our toolbox for a site plan is traffic study. I'm assuming you have to do one for the DOT for your curb cut.
We're required to submit an encroachment permit and a set of plans to the DOT for their review. A traffic impact study is not a requirement, but they will ask for it if they feel that it's necessary to look at it as part of the overall neighborhood and how everything else moves. So, to be determined.
Okay.
If they ask for it, we will certainly provide one.
Just some of the things that are on our checklist, in past developments, we've asked for traffic studies, we've asked for school impact studies, photometric plans, part of the site plan, obviously. One of the things that is key to this commission and to the public is seeing perspective. Like, I'm on the corner of X and Y, what does my building look like down the street? How does it look like in the corridor? When we did the property across the street, it was vital to the commission and to the public to see what the impact was with the building so close to the street. And if you actually go through all those minutes, we pushed those buildings back because they were just too close to the street, and how the sidewalks interacted and everything else. So if you can just look at those minutes or think about the elevations and how it's gonna look, and present that as part of your plan if you do an application, that'll go a long way in showing us the impact to the entire town center zone, not just to the half acre that we're talking about. And then several commissioners brought up the possibility of interacting with other properties to your adjacent properties. If there's a consideration to exiting out of their properties versus exiting out of your property to share their curb cuts, like to the north or to the south, just a possibility of investigation to help you.
Yeah, I believe Josh said that, contacting neighbor, that's something that we could pursue. To the south, I would say, is a little difficult with the wetlands, right?
Okay,
We
so
wouldn't
you
wanna-
got
we wouldn't want
through it to that, all right.
We wouldn't want to push on more direct wetland impacts, but the north may be a possibility depending on the openness and conversations with the butter, but certainly we can look into it.
I have nothing further.
I'd have to say, consider looking at the south, because that exits out to a traffic light. It doesn't exit to Main Street, so it's a little safer. And I believe the grade there's not a grade change between the properties.
Again, it's Ryan Hoyler. We will look at that. It's just that with the wetlands and the drainage ditch to the south, it's going to make it much more complicated to try to cross that. But it's certainly something we will look at.
Any other questions? No questions? So I just couple, I see in the front, is that like a fence area that you have in the front of the building, and then behind that, is that all bushes and.
Plantings, yes.
planting and
Yeah,
all that.
yeah. It's like a, like a, an ornamental fence and then plantings behind it, yes.
So just suggestion, if you can soften that, with maybe you have a parapet, you have a nice wall, stone wall or something like that, rather than just fenced area, because I'm assuming there might be 5-6 feet fenced, so, that just helps the looks. I think you said there is a fabric, right, that we see, is that, now, does that wear over time? Does it get dusty? Does it get discoloration? Does it all?
No, it doesn't get discolored. It doesn't wear, so to speak, over time. It's, because of the type of fabric that it's made from, and it naturally washes, with rain and other materials. Unlike glass that looks like spotty or gets dirt on it, this won't have that effect.
So there is no maintenance requirement?
No,
That
will always be clean, and if anything ever happened, you could spray it down and everything will come off of it, and then we can, remove any debris if there was like a big storm or something like that. But, it doesn't get like dirty the way that glass gets dirty.
So you said in New London, you're going to break ground. So do you have any building that is built that we can just go and visit? Is
In
that
Connecticut,
not in
no,
Connecticut?
not in Connecticut. No. In New Jersey.
Anywhere else?
In New Jersey.
New
yeah.
Jersey?
If anybody's in New Jersey, I'm happy to give you.
Well, I mean, we can just look on the internet, I'm assuming.
Google Maps.
Okay. That's what we have, and I think you saw staff had comments, the town engineer had some comments there. And then,
Yeah, they were, keep in mind, there's no application,
Yep,
and I
yep.
said that when these people submitted their comments. But, we did have the police department, for example. What we do is when we get something in, we farm it out to various departments. So, the police chief basically saying, there appears to be no parking stalls for visitors. I think we've talked about that. Stephen Sopalak, Director of Community Development and Town Engineer, stating no 50-foot upland review, only 100 feet, which we did mention that as well. Concern for number of parking spaces, where do visitors park? Seems to be a recurring theme. No drainage at this time, but we know that. Drainage to road will need a DOT approval if you're doing that. The zoning designation, not correct, TC not commercial, and I'll speak to the assessor about it, because every time we go through this, the assessor's records typically, and you may know this better than most people, I know it in Rocky Hill, that the assessor's records are typically behind quite a bit. So you're going to find that on multiple assessor cards.
And this is Ryan Hoyler, just real quick. We knew that
Yeah.
we submitted this because it's a pre-application review, and we just wanted to give you an idea of what the site plan would look like and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we were to submit a final or a full site plan application, we would have, the correct zone information and everything on there, so.
And we as staff welcome as many preliminary meetings as you need with staff. That doesn't come to this commission, it's strictly in staff, it's during the day. So if that's something you want to do, if you apply. Other comments, wetlands will have to be delineated. Once again, that's not a comment it's more of a comment for them, not this commission. Building renovation shows an architectural style, doesn't seem to be consistent with other buildings in the area or proposed. Village district review of the architecture, this is his comments. No maximum impervious listed. I say once again, a preliminary pre-app. Obviously, should there be an application, we would farm plans out to the various departments, and we can certainly have people come in and meet with us, so.
all right, any questions? Anyone, Commissioner Hose, you're listening?
I'm okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Agenda item C, discussion and update affordable housing plan with Glenn Chalder of Planometrics, review of survey results and strategies, commission consideration of a special meeting if needed.
I don't know if you want to sit back up there, or if you want to sit at the table, or if you want to, that's up to you.
Yeah, I think I don't have control of them.
You have no control.
That's probably a bigger issue than, yeah.
Okay.
That was something new, right? So, Glenn, if I can you go over why we are doing this whole exercise? What is required of the town and the planning and zoning, according
talk
to
about
what state
830G.
statute? Because I think, again, I want to.
We don't want to talk about 830G per se.
No.
He's asking.
I know.
No,
know.
I'm
Okay.
talking about this,
Yes.
because what's happening is, what I've seen is people are not aware of why we are going through this exercise, based on the questions that I have read, back and forth and all that stuff. So I think it would be good to know that we have to do it, and why we have to do it, and what happens if we don't do it, what happens, so that basic understanding.
So I'll go back just a little bit, just for the commission. I'm Glenn Chalder from Planometrics, and I'm pleased to have a chance to work with the commission on this particular project. The backstory on this particular situation, I'm going back to some initial materials I prepared for the commission in May, and I think it was for a meeting that we had on.
Just move your mic up so we can, yeah, there you go.
Oh wow, it sounds really loud from where I'm at, but you're not hearing that, huh? Is that better? Okay. So if you have a chance to go back to the May 18th report that I prepared, there is some information in here which helps sort of explain some of this background, but let me sort of give it to you overall. In 2017, the state passed a public act which is called Connecticut General Statute 8-30J. Okay? So it's in the same family as G, but it's not, it's different. And what that statute says, that every community in the state of Connecticut is required to prepare an affordable housing plan. The plan is intended for the municipality to state how it intends to increase the number of affordable housing developments in the community. And it goes on to state that the plan can never be more than 5 years old. And this sort of ties to the POCD situation, that your plan cannot be more than 10 years old. So I don't mean to imply this is twice as important as a POCD, but it's certainly an important issue. The state realized afterwards that there was no sort of completion date in the Public Act, and many communities who are aware of the act said, well, 2017 means that we don't have to do anything until 2022, and they waited until the end. And then as part of Public Act 2129, which I know the commission is familiar with, it actually specified that the date was going to be June 1 of 2022. And so about half the towns in Connecticut, according to OPM's database, made the deadline, and the other half are either working on it, as Rocky Hill is, or haven't even started yet. So the reasons why are, A, as the chairman points out, that the state requires that municipalities do this. But the second issue is a chart which I had in the report from May. I'm just going to hold it up for the commission to see, and you may remember this particular chart, which was in my PowerPoint. And this chart shows the relationship between income and housing prices since the 1960s on. So in the late 1960s, housing was generally 2 to 3 times people's income, and housing was readily affordable. Everybody always thinks housing is expensive, but really, when we look at it in hindsight, it was readily affordable. And it's bumped up, and so in 1989, it was bumping around the limit that housing was costing more than 30% of people's incomes on average. And that was considered to be a trigger threshold, and 830G got adopted to say, well, you know what, we need to be looking at housing and housing affordability more. And the state established legislation addressing that. And since that time, the ratio has not gone down. It's gone up quite significantly. And particularly in the last 2 years with the COVID bump, we call it, in real estate prices, housing affordability relative to incomes, even with, you know, payroll protection and all the other stuff that went on, as you well know from everything that's been written, housing is extremely expensive, and it limits the ability of two, I think, key groups or elements of our community. Older residents who may be living on fixed incomes, and housing prices can become more and more expensive for them over time, and young people trying to get into the housing market. So for people who are fortunate enough to buy in or get in, particularly purchase a house so that their equity has gone up, they think they're the smartest people in the world, right, because of the increase in equity. But if they didn't have that equity and they looked at housing prices today and said, how the heck am I going to be able to afford this in terms of the down payment, mortgage financing, et cetera? So it is an issue. The state, if we go back to the 60s again, or the 50s, the state and federal government produced affordable housing for people who really needed it. Now we have a situation where housing is expensive enough that the state can't meet the need. Housing has gotten so expensive they can't fill in that gap, and that's another rationale for 8-30G to help encourage that. And this is perhaps another step in that journey, which is that if the town's regulations inhibit or prohibit housing to meet the needs of people in the community, in the region, all we're doing really is hurting ourselves in the long run in terms of economic needs, et cetera. So the state is essentially asking each municipality, what can you do? What should you do? What will you do in terms of addressing the need for affordable housing developments? And that's the reason why I'm here before you tonight, is to help craft some plan for Rocky Hill that starts to address this issue. Like any planning document, we're not going to be changing regulations as part of this work, but we're going to be talking about regulations we have on the books that we can tweak, or circumstances or situations that we can change or talk about. And I think the key thing for us is to kind of think about some of the verbs, just like we did on the Plan of Conservation and Development. What are some of the verbs we can use as part of this? So there's two things I wanted to go over with you here tonight. First of all, we did a survey, online survey. I just want to kind of roll through the results of that for you fairly quickly, and then devote as much time as we can tonight to the other book that I prepared with regard to affordable housing strategies, because my next step is actually start to craft a plan, a document that you can now look at and start to feel and sense how it works. And I really can't do that until I get your feedback. So let me start off tonight and go through the housing plan survey. I think some supplemental information was provided to the commission in terms of some of the detailed tables and some of the other responses. I'm not going to go into that, but just give a high-level overview. So next slide, please. The survey was open for about 40 days, call it 6 or 7 weeks. We had 840 total responses. As you can see, there were definite highlights, if you will, when social media and other types of notifications went out. Clearly, we got a big bump. So it's just an interesting thing. It used to be in the old days, it was press releases and newspapers and stuff, and nowadays it's really online. And I think you'll see in some of the demographics the social media influence.
Is that a good number? Is that a good number?
I think it is. I mean, if we were doing a random sample survey of the community, if we were to get 400 responses, that really helps us narrow the margin of error, we call it. Now, this is not a random survey. People who heard about it and social media, and you can see from the demographics, it tended to be females aged 35 to 54 were the largest groups. So is it surgically precise? No, it's not. But I think it starts to give us a sense or an indication of the sentiment in the community. And I think that's its most useful value for us, because I think we'll see in the results that people are aware of the housing challenges and think there are things that can or should be done. There are other people who think that we shouldn't touch housing at all. And that's really, I think, partly a reflection of people who have housing don't understand why people who don't have housing don't have it. And it's kind of a societal dilemma that we have. and perhaps something we need to work on. Next slide, please. So we asked people whether or not they lived in Rocky Hill. There was 4% who said they did not. Some of them were either surrounding communities who were aware of the particular issue, and people from, Ontario, Canada, and San Diego, and all the other stuff. Somebody's closing on a house on Boulder Drive. We didn't exclude anybody from the results, so there's 4% of people who somehow cottoned onto the survey and decided to participate, but I don't think it's a material impact. Next slide, please. We asked people how long they have lived in Rocky Hill, and it broke down about a third, we'll say, or a third, a quarter, and maybe a little bit more, but 35% lived in town for less than 10 years, 23% 10 to 20 years, and 42% for 20 years or more. So we've really got some input from people who've lived here for different lengths of time. We asked people if they rented or owned their current residence. 84% own, 16% rent. So again, we have sentiment from both groups overall. Next slide, we asked people what general area of town they lived in. And so from the northeast quadrant, we have 26% of our responses, southeast 31%, northwest 18%, and southwest 25%. So again, we're kind of getting good overall distribution in the community. We asked people when they first moved to Rocky Hill, what type of housing unit did they live in? And from this information, what we learned was that 54% their first house in Rocky Hill was a single-family home. And that is roughly the mix in our housing market overall. Is roughly half the houses in Rocky Hill are single-family. 26% rented apartments, and 18% bought a condo or a townhouse. And then we asked the question about how many different housing units have you lived in Rocky Hill since then? For 59% of the people, they still live in the first house that they bought in Rocky Hill or living in the apartment they rented. And other people, as you can see, have stayed in the community and continue to either move up or move down on the housing ladder based on their housing needs at that particular time. We asked people how long they thought they might continue to live in Rocky Hill. 33% thought 10 years or less, 29% up to 10 to 20 years, and 38% for 28 years or more. So there's a fair amount of stickiness in the community in terms of people anticipating that they'll be here for another 10 to 20 years or longer. We asked people for different housing types in Rocky Hill, whether they thought Rocky Hill had too little, too much, or just the right amount of such housing. So this bar graph here, this bank, if you will, is 100% of the responses. Green indicate people think we have too little of that, and perhaps we could have more. The gold is we have too much of this, and then the blue in the middle is it's just about right. I don't think there's any major finding in this in terms of a direction for the community, but different sentiments of people. One of the things that I felt did come out of the survey responses is that participants were more likely to say too much for apartments compared to condominiums. And I think it's just a sort of an aversion, if you will, to rentals on occasion.
4 or 5.
We asked people if they thought the next housing option would be larger or smaller when they live today, and 57% felt smaller. And that's partly a reflection of the aging demographic in the community, that kids have grown, et cetera, and they're thinking about their other housing options. It might be smaller and perhaps more affordable. And do you think Rocky Hill has enough of the housing type you may want to live in next? And 56% said yes, 44% said no. The next slide was, are you personally aware of anyone that would benefit from having access to housing that is more affordable? And 51% said yes. So people are recognizing the fact that there is a housing challenge, and they know people who are affected by this. We then asked the question, which 3 of the following housing needs do you feel are the highest priorities to be addressed? In most responses, the most sensitivity that people had, or the most willingness they had to consider housing needs, was the bar next to the bottom, which is options and choices affordable to moderate income workers such as teachers, police, fire, emergency medical, et cetera. So in a sense, the wording there suggested people who are providing services to the community and may have a challenge affording housing, and people said, okay, I'm comfortable with that. In terms of the level of first choice, second choice, or third choice. Housing options for younger persons, housing options for older persons. Those were the top three. And then the bottom three were housing authority units for lower income elderly or disabled, housing options and choices for people who want to downsize, and housing options and choices for people with lower incomes. So we're still dealing with some challenges, if you will, in that regard. We then asked people about possible strategies that we might use or consider for affordable housing, and asked them whether they would agree or disagree with the statement, and strongly, et cetera. So these are now grouped in the level of support, from the most support down to least support, and the results are on 2 slides. So the response, or the question that people agreed with the most, was guiding the design of housing options so it fits into the physical characteristics of Rocky Hill. That was number 1, and 82% either agreed or somewhat agreed or strongly agreed with that. 60% agreed with the concept of more housing options and choices in and near the town center, which would help support local businesses and maintain a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use area. Then there were 4 categories that the level of support was in the 50% to 60% range, looking at town-owned properties to see if there were any properties that could support housing options, allowing residential uses on the upper floors of business buildings along the Silestine Highway and Route 3. Focused primarily on housing options and choices in areas served by public water and sewer. And the statement, having more housing options and choices would make Rocky Hill a better place. On the next slide, talk about other questions where there wasn't the level of support was less than 50% of participants. The statement, affordable housing options and choices should be located in all areas of Rocky Hill. Rocky Hill should seek ways to increase the number of housing units affordable to low and moderate income households. New residential development should be required to provide affordable housing as part of that new development. New development should be offered incentives to provide affordable housing. The town should create affordable housing units at 42%, and then establishing a town housing fund to support housing strategies received the lowest responses. It's interesting because that was really a question about the concept of setting up a fund, not funding the fund. But I think this level of reaction to that, people thought that that was going to be sort of their tax money going to this. And it's an option, but not necessarily a requirement, et cetera. So that starts to give you a sense of some of the strategies and our priorities that people felt strongly about. There was an open-ended question next, which is for participants, are there other strategies you feel that the town should consider? And there were 37 responses with some strategies which mirrored or added to what we'd already talked about: reusing existing buildings, the town center, the Silestine Highway, Route 3, mixed-use developments, et cetera. There were 28 responses that were predominantly the people recognized the need for housing, but they weren't always sure exactly what the approaches or strategies should be. And then there was 119 responses where people were expressing concepts like, we have enough housing already, let the market decide. They oppose low-income housing. It'll have negative impacts on our community. So even though the question was about strategies, people were expressing, again, their concerns. And then we get into some of the demographics. What age group are you part of? 35 to 54 was the predominant category. To which gender do you most identify? 60% of the participants in the survey were female, and another 8% preferred not to answer. In terms of which of the following best describes you, 66% identified as white or Caucasian, and 17% preferred not to answer. So the minorities groups weren't as represented in the survey as Caucasian. How many people are living in your household? What we have here is a predominance of 2, 3, and 4 households, which is a little uncommon, but again, that reflects the demographic of 35 to 54. This is the type of thing that you would see. We asked people for information about their combined household income, and the responses were across the board. In the lower two categories, below about $75,000 a year, are people who might be eligible, depending on family size, for what we would call affordable housing or affordable housing thresholds at 80% of area median income or less. And then finally, the last question, was there any other thoughts you would like to share with us today? 551 people said nope, no other input. Some had some additional thoughts again in terms of the need for affordable housing, the town center, some of the wording to the survey questions. Some comments came on that. Thank you for doing the survey, et cetera. And again, another 43 comments again where people sort of expressed concerns overall. So I think the survey responses sort of paint the picture for us a little bit in terms of the scenario or the situation we find ourselves in overall with this type of issue, because I think it is a sensitive issue for people. Any questions or comments or thoughts about the survey?
So on the concerns that we have received, are we going to address those so that, I think it comes down to education, right? We have to let people know based on the concerns, like what the realities are and what the facts are, and if we are not there in next 5 to 10 years, what are the other impacts that can have? I mean, it could have financial impacts from state, I'm just talking out loud, like maybe they say you haven't met 10%, so you're not going to get, we are going to reduce your funding, for example. So things like that. So I think it is telling us a lot, and I want to at least address those concerns, educate people, so they know what we are dealing with in terms of housing.
And I think people haven't been exposed to this issue before. Again, most of the people who live in Rocky Hill have housing in Rocky Hill, and generally it would meet their needs. So the issue is, why are we thinking about housing for other people is something that they haven't thought about before. Until I found a situation where my son is looking to buy a house, and the challenge, he's living in the Boston area, the challenges that he has had are remarkable. And then again, dealing with some elderly in-laws who are facing some additional housing challenges. So when we ask the question, do you know somebody? And 51% say yes. When that number edges higher, because people are now either dealing with children or parents with housing-related issues, people will become more aware of it. So I couldn't agree more that I think education is an important consideration here for
And I
people.
think it's like in your example, our parents or grandparents or our kids, I think it's relatable. But I think what we are missing out on is, firefighters, police, teachers, I mean, who just graduate from college, and they want to live separate, but they can't afford because of the income level and stuff. So I think that there are other negatives so who is going to come to this town and provide those services, right? We will be lacking those services because
Exactly.
people can't travel here.
And I think as the first application on your agenda here this evening was the addition of a new restaurant, right? Congratulations, that's wonderful. 100 new jobs, wonderful. Where are we going to find 100 people who, in the middle of a snowstorm or blizzard, maybe they can't get here, or people can't get their food, or they complain about the wait at a restaurant, or you go to Dunkin' Donuts and complain about how long it takes to get through the drive-thru.
And go to another one, because we got a bunch of them.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so we'll solve the housing problem by keep sending people. No, I'm kidding. But I think these are part of the issues that people don't understand the secondary things that are going on with some of the things. And so this is, again, an example of what communities to start to explore what can a community do. And that's why I think I'm excited to have a chance to work with you guys on this.
Were you able to draw any other correlations between some of the respondent characteristics to the answers, whereas if you had just taken the percentage of the senior population and then ran the stats based on the senior population to create trends so that we could get a better idea of what they're saying, so we can get a better idea of developing a plan that meets a need. I just thought it was interesting, you know, a couple of things like 60% of the respondents were women and only 30% or so were men. Well, what were the men doing? They left it to, I mean, assuming there's two in a home, but maybe not. But just wondering if there's any correlations to draw from, you know, just like with U.S. Census, they'll break things out by the different categories to see how the response has changed.
So the direct answer to your question is no and yes. And what I mean by that is as follows. The budget didn't really allow chasing all of the data into multiple directions. But the yes answer is that what I did is I took all of the survey responses from SurveyMonkey. I exported them to an Excel database, which I created. I created an Excel database, not a spreadsheet, a table it's called, which would allow somebody who has that level of interest to go in and select all men as opposed to all women and look at the responses based on that distinction. Or if somebody's familiar with what are called pivot tables in Excel, you can run pivot tables on the data. So again, my work, I believe, is going to be focused on the strategies and the policies and moving the community along in that direction, but I didn't want to abandon the data. So the data is archived, preserved. Kim has the spreadsheet, and you can see it in all its glory if you're interested. So I think the next area I'd like to go for as long as you guys can hang in there tonight is a booklet on possible housing strategies for Rocky Hill. I can go back to the cover page if you would, just for a moment. One page before that. There you go. So stop right there, thank you. So as you may recall, what I had mentioned is the state statute talks about increasing the number of affordable housing developments in Rocky Hill. If you go through the way the statutes are constructed, affordable housing developments actually have two flavors, one of which is called assisted housing. This is housing which receives state or federal money, like the Housing Authority, for example. And so how could we increase that? And then the second category is what's called a set-aside development, which Rocky Hill may end up with its first in the not-too-distant future. The set-aside development is a particular type and flavor of development where at least 30% of the units are deed restricted as affordable. So that's a special type. But there's other ways that affordable housing can be provided. You probably have heard of and are aware of the state's 10% threshold for affordable housing. And when they calculate that 10% threshold and where a municipality sits on that, they count those two flavors, assisted housing and a set-aside development, but they also count other forms of deed-restricted housing, and they also count what are called tenant rental assistance certificates. A tenant household receives supplemental funding from the state to the household, and also CHFA mortgages. And these are mortgage instruments where people have access to lower down payments, some flexibility, if you will, not having to have mortgage insurance, et cetera. And so part of the question becomes one of how we might be able to increase affordable housing through a bunch of different flavors, not just the two that the state had in the statutes.
Can you go over just in one liner the benefit of having at least 10% affordable housing in a town?
Yeah, it's hard.
One line.
The 10% number is not a state goal. It's a state threshold. What they did is they established this threshold and said, listen, if you have more than 10%, then H30G doesn't apply to you. So your zoning regulations are in effect, and whatever the regulations are in the town center or the C-zone or whatever else are the regs that are in effect. If it's community is not at 10%, you're below that, then an applicant can apply for what they want, where they want. And really the only limitation that's come out of the courts is it can't be in an industrial zone. That's basically it. So there are benefits to having more affordable housing in terms of benefits to the community and supporting, the strong employers and tax base that we have in Rocky Hill. And there can also be benefits in terms of the desired build-out of the community by following the rules rather than having these pop up. There are some communities in the state that have been the recipients of dozens of these applications. So the fact that yours has been 33 years since the statute was adopted, and you may be getting your first. I agree with what Kim said earlier. This is an area for education.
Yes.
So I encourage you in that effort.
Hey, Glenn,
Yes.
quick question. So these thresholds, these 10%, these 30%, when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about rental and/or ownership,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think the math gets a little convoluted, right? There's all these percentage numbers floating around. But I think back in the memo from May, went through the math as to what this works out for Rocky Hill. What is 80% of AMI? What is 60% of AMI? What the rental rates need to be. I think the rents that were discussed earlier tonight in the $1,450 range are in the ballpark for, or are they in the ballpark for one bedroom unit? Bear with me
I
just for a
think it was
second.
1,500. I think that's,
Yeah, I think he was saying 1450, but.
yeah, but I think they mentioned 1,450, and I think the range was, it was around 1,500.
So that may be optimistic, depending on how the math is done. So I'm looking at page 3 of the May 18 memo, and it says at 80% AMI, a one-bedroom unit, it's constrained by what's known as fair market rent in an 830G, and that's $1,265 a month. But those numbers change regularly based on HUD income and their calculations of fair market rent. So the math gets kind of convoluted. But clearly, you'd have to get justification for the numbers in terms of what's being proposed. So I've broken down the memo into flavors. I'd like to try to get through the flavors quickly to get your thoughts and feedback. So on page 2 of the memo is background information about what are assisted housing units and how do these work. And we have a table here that says to us, well, Rocky Hill has 70 assisted housing units which are managed by the Housing Authority in 2 developments. And then we have another 165 units which exist, are not owned by the Housing Authority. They're owned by private investors, developers, et cetera. So the grand total we have is 235 units in town. It's hard for us to plan for more of these by private developers. They find funding opportunities, and because of those financing or funding opportunities, there are restrictions put in place on these, or other parameters that apply, and so those count to the affordable housing list. But the one area that we can have some impact could be on the Housing Authority, and on the top of page 3, one of our strategies here is to help the Housing Authority create additional units of assisted housing. They have been in the process of rehabilitating those units as funding becomes available, and in the process of looking to do the same thing right now. Most of the Housing Authority projects were built many years ago as one-story flats and consume a lot of land area. And one of the opportunities for us in the future could be to try to make more efficient use of those sites, or actually add adjacent land to provide land. Land is one of the hardest things to get in terms of affordable housing. And the Housing Authority is not washed in cash, right? They are struggling, if you will, to try to find ways to address the situations that they have today. So I think that the strategies here, again, are supporting the Housing Authority to create additional units and try to make more efficient land, use of the land which they have. And that could include a special housing fund, which we can talk about later, et cetera. I don't know an easy way to do this, right? Because all 169 municipalities in Connecticut are preparing housing plans. This is low-hanging fruit. So what do you think all 169 housing plans are going to say? Very competitive. And Rocky Hill, I would say, from looking at their financing and their reports from the Department of Housing and CHFA, they've been struggling a little bit trying to meet the housing needs of their clientele, and they're mostly elderly. When the projects were first built, Rocky Hill was smaller in terms of population than it is today. There weren't as many elderly residents. So our elderly population has grown significantly, somewhere along the way, the units went from being solely elderly to elderly/disabled. So the units are turning over, mostly because of elderly people, but also we're losing units to disabled people. And disabled people need housing units as well. But originally built for the elderly there's just not as many units available. So our first family of strategies here could be to support these kinds of efforts and make people in the town through education more aware of this. How do you feel about the strategies on page 3? Generally thumbs up?
Yeah.
Perfect. So pages 4 and 5 are about set-aside developments. Set-aside development is the type of development which may be coming into you shortly. This is, again, an 830G application where the rules are different. I think if you want a quick lesson, the information here on page 4 will tell you some of the basics about how an 830G application works. If you say, I wish we were exempt or didn't have to comply with this, the sidebar here says, if you can get to 500, you can get to 10% of your housing stock being affordable, that involves adding 500 qualifying units. That's going to be hard to do, right? And the other thing is to earn a moratorium, and you can earn a moratorium by earning what are called housing unit equivalent points. And that's by some units going on the ground, which there are different points associated with them. So if the development comes in at 80% of area median income, you get some points, but rentals more than ownership, et cetera. And there's a table in the glossary in the back that explains how all of this works for you. But that's sort of the basics of 830G. On page 5, the strategies that I would suggest for your consideration, some of the strategies in here are sort of, let's call them basic college level courses. These are probably more graduate level type of strategies here. But the challenge we can have is that if we end up with multiple set-aside developments in town, each are required to submit a housing affordability plan, and if they're all different, you can imagine the mayhem that ensues, trying to figure out how to enforce them. And there have been situations around the state where they have not been well enforced. Units get sold without, people ignore the price restrictions, and once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't get it back. So the strategies here, which I'm recommending for your consideration in Rocky Hill, are to prepare standard documents so that an applicant submits your plan with your language and takes exception to provisions, and now you know what's going on. Ridgefield has done this, and so right on their website is a standard housing affordability plan, and you could do the same thing. Develop it, put it on the town website, and say, just use our document. If you want to take exception, just tell us, but that's your foundation moving forward. The second thing here is a list of approved administrators or approving administrators. The housing affordability plans only work if somebody who knows what they're doing is qualifying the occupants, the sale price or rental rate, and verifying that it's being followed. If they don't, then again, the unit goes fluid. I found a situation in another municipality where the builder's receptionist was the administrator. I heard of a situation in another community where the condo board were the administrators. They had no interest in qualifying people for the units.
No.
These are not good. So I think the issue would be to look at ways that we could make that more efficient. The statutes say that on a deed restricted development that the deed restriction has to be for at least 40 years. If we're going to go through all those work of creating affordable units, we may want to have them around for longer than 40 years. Now, it's hard in the middle of an application process to do that. But if your model housing affordability plan up front says, we are going to look at this issue and either ask you for more than 40 years, or down here under 2.3 on possible other strategies, is to look at ways that we can capture what I'm going to call the value increment at the end of 40 years. I own an affordable unit. I bought it in year 39. I'm going to sell it in year 40 or 41. and it goes from a restricted price to a market price, and who gets to keep that money?
Yeah.
I do. But why? What we were creating was a below market rate unit that would benefit people who need below market rate units. So it's a benefit to somebody, but to allow them in 40 years from now to walk off with the windfall may not be the best approach. So the issue could be, does the 40 years automatically renew? Or do you buy us out, give us money for the housing trust fund, 50% of the windfall, whatever else might be, so that we can actually create more housing. But if we don't pay attention to the 40 years, the one thing we know is going to happen is the units are going to disappear. And if you know anything about finance and the concept of present value, the present value of a sale price or rental rate 40 years from now isn't that significant. So it's an opportunity for the town to consider, and this section of the draft plan would recommend that it be investigated. Not that you do it, but these are things for the town to consider to support this type of approach. How do you feel about the strategies on page 5? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's about accountability, really.
Well, it is, because I think for many years, municipalities didn't like 830G.
Yeah.
They just wanted it to go away. So they ignored it.
Yeah.
But there are entire developments where the number of affordable units have just winnowed away because of whether it's malfeasance in the, the sale or rental process, whatever. It's hard to get the genie back. And these are hard, as you will learn, these are hard to create. So the next set of strategies is on pages 6, 7, and 8. And this is that there are other ways to create deed-restricted units. And just like the commission did on the town center development, you talked with the applicant, you worked with the applicant, you got a commitment for 10%. And I applaud the commission for that, because those units are going to benefit the people who really need those. So the question could be for us, are there other ways that we could either incentivize or require these types of housing units? You could have had a developer who said to you, no, I'm, going to go for market rate. That's what my development's built on. I do not want to do any affordable units, and you may not get them. But if you crafted regulations that either incentivized or required affordable units as part of any development in the future, you could make progress. If any new development gets built and doesn't provide any affordable housing, we're moving further and further away from the 10%. So if we get at least 10%, we're not losing ground, we're just kind of chugging along. And if we can get more than that, and some communities have like a 15% set aside.
Yeah.
A little bit of catch up on
Let's
this.
do 15%.
It's possible, but this is clearly an issue that you probably, when the regulation is being adopted, you're probably going to get some pushback on. So I think you need to think it through, but the idea could be to move in this direction. So on page 7, there are sort of two options here for your consideration. Strategy 3.2 is require affordable housing or incentivize affordable housing. Those are the two options there, 1 and 2. I don't think, in the orange box, I think you got to pick one or the other, right? You can't incentivize for some and require for others, et cetera. I think you have to have a program or policy across the board. So require could simply be any new development or any new multifamily development or any development of 5 units or more or whatever it would be has to make provision for affordable units. 10% of the units or 15% have to be affordable. Or the other option is to incentivize and say, well, if you're going to provide 10 or 15 or 20% affordable units, you'll get more density. You'll get, a slightly bigger development. But, the units, again, are going to help meet needs. So I think that perhaps one of the strongest ways for the commission to advance in this area is to look at those two options, whether to incentivize, whether to require. And it's not a decision that has to get made, this month or next, but I think something to be explored over the next 5 years so that if developments do come in, they might address that particular issue. There's also
Is there a known threshold of too much is not a good thing? Like, what if you said, 30%?
Well, that's an 830G, in which case your zoning regs don't apply.
No, but if we put it in our zoning regs, 30% on multifamily.
And if I'm a potential developer applicant, I'm gonna say to you, well, congratulations, here's your 830G application, I don't have to comply with your zoning.
Oh, okay.
So I think the issue becomes one of, I have heard developers say that an 80% AMI unit, the cost to construct it is roughly what you can sell or rent it for. So it doesn't cost them money, okay? But they're not making any money. But a 60% unit costs more to build than they can sell or rent it for. So that.
Yeah, that's where I was aiming at, yeah, okay.
So they're not gonna be enamored with that concept.
No.
But everybody who's thinking about this is thinking about building at the 80% threshold. And there's people at 70 and 60 and 50 and 40% of AMI. There are housing needs that are out there. So it becomes sort of a complicated issue. And you could, again, just as in the very back of the report in the glossary, there's the housing unit equivalent points. You could actually have density bonuses based on how deep of affordability it is. And that might be something worth thinking about or considering. And then on the bottom of page 7, strategy 3.3 is that it's possible to deed restrict existing units. There are some situations around New England where municipalities have cooperated with property purchasers. A young couple wants to buy a house and the town says, you know what, we're in with you. We'll buy the land and we'll own the land forever. You buy the house. And then the town gets a lease payment on the land, but it's much less than it would have been for the capitalized into the mortgage, if you will. And so you have a cooperative ownership, and that lot will always be restricted in the future. The sale price is deed restricted because it's just the house that's being purchased. You get to use the land, but you don't necessarily own it. There could be other situations where elderly people might agree to a deed restriction for a cash payment or a tax reduction on the part of the town. So there are ways to deed restrict existing units that don't necessarily involve new construction. So I think this is an area, again, communities are thinking about how to explore this, and I think that could be the operative verb for Rocky Hill. We'll think about this and we'll explore it. There's no great solutions yet, and it could involve money. And the question is, where are we going to get that? So again, food for thought.
I think here, and I've raised that before, how do we address, because we have units all over the place. We have the highest concentration of apartments and units, right? But we don't even meet 10%. So what are the options or strategies for the existing ones? I mean, if they come to P&Z for something, I don't know what that something is, but are there examples of, well, existing condo unit, came for something, and that's where town said, hey, you know what, let's open this affordability requirements and this and that and all that. So I don't know what those are or whether there are examples like that.
I've thought about that quite a bit, and from working with Rocky Hill on its POCDs in the past, I took a day in the spring and drove around town and looked at all of the condo and apartment projects to understand the distinctions and the differences between them. I think on ownership units, it's very hard to tell somebody who paid market rate for a unit that, I'm sorry, your unit's deed restricted. You can't sell it for as much as you bought it for, because I think the constitutional phrase there is taking of property, and that's something that you certainly want to stay away from. So that becomes a challenge. New units, I think, can be part of the mix. Rental developments could be an area for exploration if, let's say, because of modifications to the parking regulations, there was a potential now for more units on a site to take a portion of the parking lot, build some more units, then that, again, could be an area where the set-aside requirement could apply. But depending on their mortgage financing and everything else and the size of the property, it's got to be a fair number of units to make that worth their while. So it may be hard to retrofit existing developments to include affordable housing unless we get to be really creative about it. I think one of the things you may have noticed back on page 2 or 3 is that Elms Common is listed as assisted housing. I couldn't quite understand how that could be, so I called the Department of Housing, and it turns out that when they built that development, they got a HUD insurance program. And it continues to show up on the listing every year, so the state counts it. But the property's been sold at least one time since it was originally built. So I'm not gonna ask any more questions about it, because that's 155 units that go on our list. And it'd be a sad day if we lost 155 units which are credited to us. So, are there ways for us to incentivize that? I don't have a good answer for you yet. I think other communities will continue to work on this in the future. But I think for us to be able to explore some of these areas, either incentivize or require, are things that could provide some avenues in the future.
Did we look at the group homes in our town?
I asked the state about that. And so the question is, there are some group homes that, because of the way that they are funded and financed, get tossed into the mix, and there are other ones which do not. The VA hospital was another question that had come up back in May, and there are some units there which...
They're residential.
Yes, but they're not funded or financed in a way that get them into the assisted housing category, so...
Really?
So the specific response from the state was, so on the issue of group homes, many group homes are already considered affordable housing and appear on the affordable housing appeals list. I don't think there's any in Rocky Hill. The key is that some group homes have received financial assistance from the state, CHFA or FUD for their creation acquisition, and have an affordability requirement tied to them. And so I think the ones in Rocky Hill do not have an affordability requirement tied to them, that the occupants do not have to be income eligible.
Oh, they don't.
In terms of veterans housing, if this is in reference to the Department of Veterans Affairs campus in Rocky Hill, there are supportive housing units on that site that are counted as affordable housing. They have rental subsidies tied to them. So in other words, it's not the units that count, it goes under the tenant rental assistance category. And they show up on the rental subsidy tabulation. There are other housing units on the campus that are not exclusively used to provide affordable housing. In other words, they're used for staff, et cetera, and those do not count.
What about the units they have on West Street that they give to people they randomly will rent them to people in need, veterans, young couples. I just knew a young couple that rented.
Yeah.
And it got really
If
low.
they're not, here's the challenge we find now in the state's affordable housing appeals list. The criteria, it has to be deed restricted or state or federally funded. So the fact that somebody does it out of the goodness of their heart or helpful, state doesn't count it because it could be gone next year, show up again the year later, be gone for the next 10 years, et cetera. So the state effort here is to create deed-restricted units or units that otherwise comply. And that just makes the job that much harder.
So it's more in the context of guaranteed affordable housing.
Yeah, and I
To a
think,
point where, I mean, because if you can change your mind tomorrow, there's no guarantee, so.
and I think that's what the state has tried to build on, a solid foundation of what they can count. And so there are a number of towns around the state that have lobbied for what we would call naturally occurring affordable housing, housing in the community which sell or rent at affordable prices naturally, and the state won't count them. Some communities have said, well, can you give us, I know one municipality is up at like 8.5%. They have like 8,000 units in the community which are naturally affordable. The state won't count them. And if they said, give us credit for one unit for every 10 or 20 or 30 naturally occurring affordable units, they'd be exempt. The state, no, it's got to be deed restricted. So that's the way the definition rolls. Every year there's talk of the legislature about changing it, and it doesn't happen. It's one of the more contested areas. How do you feel generally about the strategies on page 7? Reasonable for carrying forward?
I like the idea also about the tax sales and the foreclosures, because we're seeing a lot of people that, through tax sales or whatever, they weren't unable to keep up their properties. And it's some of the smaller homes we have in town, so that's a,
Yeah, and I think there
idea.
are ways
It's a
for
really good
those
idea.
to count, and actually, they can be sold out with deed restrictions, or it couldn't become this cooperative ownership type of scenario. On page 8, I've identified here some areas for possible exploration of zoning regulation changes. This is a little bit edgier here, but this is ways that the commission could actually tweak some of your current regulations and to provide for an affordable housing requirement or set aside. So section 3B of the regulations basically limits residential development to elderly or active adult, and you could enlarge that, not necessarily requiring the elderly or active adult, provided at least X% of the units are deed restricted as affordable. Section 4B is mixed-use projects. Second floor of buildings on the Silestine Highway, for example. Again, the units, X% deed restricted as affordable. So there could be ways in some of these areas, conservation, subdivision, active adult housing, cluster residence, to either establish an incentive or a requirement for some affordable units in that. So I've got this in a blue box now because these are quite specific, and I don't know if you want the affordable housing plan to be this specific or identify these as possible areas for exploration, or how you'd like to approach these. But these are some of the things that I looked through your regs and came up with as possible considerations in the future.
could I just want to interject. We as staff, we meet with people inquiring about lots of things, and we do this on a daily basis. Without giving away the farm, we've had at least 3 inquiries from people that have office space in town. And we know the office market isn't what it used to be. And they are inquiring as to possible conversions of some of their office space to residential units. They're all along the same area, all along Silestine Highway. And I've always thought it was a great idea to do that. Obviously, there's code issues. There's different codes between commercial building codes and residential building codes. But every time I talk to someone, I always mention, and would you be willing to give us some affordable units? So, so far everyone's been cooperative, at least on a preliminary basis. But I think it's a very doable thing, especially in town.
And I think it helps the owners as well from income perspective, because commercial income is not reliable, but there is a need for this type of housing, so it helps them when the upper 2 floors are filled with tenants. There is income. So I think it goes both ways, and I always believe, I think on Silestine Highway, if you create more mass of people living, that's going to transform that whole area. Right now, it's a highway, and everybody's afraid of that, to do something with that. But I think having more people living helps that area, I think, in every way.
So if the commission's okay with the idea, what I'd like to do is add this as possible areas for exploration. To me, that provides fuzzy language that doesn't bind the commission to anything. But I think one of the conversations with the commercial property owner on the Silestine Highway, or even Route 3, could be, this is a 40-year deed restriction, and that's going to give people some serious pause and say, okay, I'm looking at the situation right now today, but am I willing to do this for 40 years? And have an exploration about where the sweet spot could be. Maybe it's not 15 or 20%, maybe it's 10 or 12. But the issue would be, we get some affordable units out of it, and the other benefit is we're putting these buildings back into productive use, to something which is not allowed today. So I think housing could meet our community development objectives, and getting some affordable housing at the same time could also be a double benefit. So we okay with possible areas for exploration on page 8? Page 9 is about trying to encourage the other types of housing that count to the state's affordable housing appeals list. So these are tenant rental certificates. A household gets a certificate, and now they take that certificate to an apartment, and they don't spend more than 30% of their income, and the state makes up the difference between what they can afford and what the apartment costs. So you can't have a luxury apartment, but you can have a nice apartment, and the state makes up that difference. If we can attract those people to Rocky Hill, or even, for example, at the Veterans Home, get them to be recognized as rental assistants, boom, those go right to the bottom line on our affordable housing appeals list. I don't think you can actually give them money, because, right, as soon as you give them money, that adjusts their income and makes them perhaps ineligible for rental assistance. So you can't do that. But are there ways? I know of one community that's exploring the idea of a short-term loan for the down payment or security deposit on an apartment. Right? So within a month or two, they're going to get the security deposit back from their other unit, and they'll be able to pay back the short-term loan, but it could make the difference that they come to Rocky Hill as to some other place. So is that a possibility? And then the same thing goes for CHFA mortgages. Right now, you can see from the math here on the page, we have 62 rental certificates in use in Rocky Hill at the present time, and 157 CHFA mortgages. I don't know what it was last year, but a number of CHFA mortgages have come off the books because homeowners realized with the housing escalation, they could capture the increase in equity, and so CHFA mortgages are disappearing. So town's affordable housing count is going down, as we would all see that we could get out of the mortgage requirements and make some money. But closing cost assistance or down payment assistance, some type of cooperative ownership program, or even education of realtors and others could be possible strategies here that could increase our affordable housing numbers. How do you feel about the strategies on page 9?
Just so you know, years ago, we had not only a tri-town homeownership assistance program through CDBG. We did
Yes.
down payment assistance, closing cost assistance, and then we had our own as well, also in association with the housing rehab program. So it worked well for a period of time, and then it's like it's shut down. That was years ago.
Yeah.
So when we did the tri-town, because the tri-town was the more recent application.
Do you get
and,
CDBG funding, or only a small city is on application for it?
It
Not an
was
entitlement community, right?
no, not at all. It was hard to prove.
Yep.
It's hard for Rocky Hill to prove that that's why we did tri-town, and that worked out well. But most of the requests were from other communities, not Rocky Hill. We had very few requests for that.
CDBG is one way, I think, for housing rehab.
Mhm.
It's like a loan program you start, and, maybe we get some units that way.
So for CDBG is Community Development Block Grant, and there's two types of communities in the country, what are called entitlement communities, where they get a set amount of money each year, and then they have to use it to benefit low-income households and neighborhoods. And then there are other communities that actually have to apply for what are generally known as small cities grants to get funding for a specific purpose. And this can sometimes be a situation where the costs of setting up and administering the program make it a big challenge in town halls, which are sometimes short-staffed. But as Dimple points out, it's for maintenance and improvement of housing units so they don't fall into disrepair, et cetera. Guys, we're close to the end here. 2 more pages. So page 10 is the idea about strategy. 5.2 is the concept of organizing for housing, which the question is, who is going to be the gatekeeper or the overseer of housing-related issues in town? Is it really the Planning and Zoning Commission? Well, you're going to have people applying to you for things, and you're going to have 2 hats on. It's a little bit strange. You've also got social service agencies. I've had a chance to talk to the social service agencies in town and others who deal with this on a daily basis. And it goes just beyond planning and zoning. So we can prepare the plan, but there's a lot of other facets to this. So one of the recommendations could be establishing a committee or a commission or something in town to sort of see this. There have been some changes in the housing-related entities in Rocky Hill, so the housing partnership no longer exists. There's another one that's gone.
Fair housing is becoming active again.
Fair housing is
They're-
ramping
they're-
back up.
They're
and now we
ramping
also
back
have
up
the
now.
Commission on Diversity and Inclusion.
Correct.
So there's some changes going around here on this particular one, but I think the town would benefit from having an entity which coordinates the education efforts, the programs, the ideas, and I don't think it should be a regulatory body. I don't think it should be you guys. But are you comfortable with advocating that the town try to figure out some organization or entity to take responsibility for this?
I think right, I mean, rather than creating a brand new, they can look at like either housing authority or this diversity or whatever we have, or fair housing, or some existing that you can just add in a couple of tasks and say,
It may not work quite that simply. The housing authority is.
Separate.
Yes, they're a quasi-public entity, which is called the Rocky Hill Housing Authority, but
They're not.
it really doesn't have much in the way of formal affiliation with the town. So I think we gotta figure out something, but I think we can also float this one up the flagpole a little bit and let others think about who this should be. I think the other issue here is the concept of a special housing fund. So there are two thoughts that go into this. The first of which is that the town creates in its books a separate account, which is the housing account. It has no money in it, but it's a place that money could be put for housing over time. Money could come in from gifts, donations, bequests, zoning fees, town budgetary items, banks meeting their Community Reinvestment Act obligations by donating money. But there's some place to put it now, which is under the town's watch and can be used for other activities. I worked in the past with a couple of communities who have set these up, and one community was quite successful. They used the money in the Housing Trust Fund to pre-design and pre-approve the Housing Authority expansion of a project which modernized 1950s and 1960s units into the units of today. And they doubled the number of units that they were able to offer. And then all the money got paid back when they got their construction financing from HUD. So it's an opportunity, if you will, to not create a slush fund, but to create a fund from purposeful acts that can be used to support housing. So I think the plan should recommend that the community investigate that and move in this direction. I know that only 34% of the people in the survey thought that was a great idea, but I think if they had a chance to really understand the benefits that could come from this, that it would, they would be understanding and supportive of the fact that its ability to fast track some of the affordable housing developments, or even the housing authority, for example. So how do you feel about that strategy?
How about banks? I know you mentioned banks. If there is a partnership between town and banks, and banks are the ones where people are going for mortgages, and they know who qualifies for low income this or that or whatever, and there's some partnership there, and
Not sure whether or not that could work well because of the bank's business obligations, their lending committees, et cetera. But the way that I think could be successful is there's this federal law, which is the Community Reinvestment Act, which requires banks to act responsibly in their communities and reinvest where they're making money in terms of, loans and interest, et cetera. And the Community Reinvestment Act rewards activities such as this. So some banks look at this at the end of the year and say, well, we haven't, let's $40,000 to the Rocky Hill Fund. Boom. 40 grand is, wow. And that can go quite a way. So it's a way for us to be a willing recipient of what banks could do. So we could educate them and they could.
maybe
Does that sound like a reasonable idea? Okay. So there's 5.3, if accessory dwelling units, workforce housing, micro units, and universal design. So down at the bottom, micro units are smaller units, and 515 square feet is not a particularly large unit. It's not really a micro, but yeah, it's 30 units on a half an acre, 60 units per acre. But, you know, in terms of the size of the building and FAR, it's meeting a need for people for, you know, one-bedroom units. And the concept of universal design is something which is age-friendly, that the unit is lever door handles, no entry showers and door thresholds and other things like that, that as people, both my in-laws are in a wheelchair or a walker. Trying to get them around is a huge challenge, and so no entry is a big deal.
Elevators.
What's that?
We got these two-story developments going in without elevators, and still somebody's gotta get up to the second floor, and some third floor.
No.
Glenn, would in-law apartments
Yeah, I mean, I
count
think that the
as
term that's
affordable
used-
housing? I mean, somebody's living there possibly for free,
Yeah.
you know?
So the statute's used to provide for that, but Public Act 2129 said a municipality cannot require the accessory dwelling unit be affordable. So somebody can offer it to you, or you can provide an incentive for, but you cannot require it to bid. So it was
Okay,
hard.
lower my taxes, I'll let you have mine.
There you go. It's hard to enforce.
Don't deed restricted. Give me a tax incentive. Come on, Kim.
We're on the case, yeah, tomorrow.
Yes, okay.
Because there are plenty. We have plenty of in-law apartments.
I think
They're
these are-
accessory units. We don't call them in-laws because anybody can,
Yes. You can't limit them anymore to.
we never, I don't think we ever did. No. We also allow for detached units now.
Are we okay with 5.3 for now?
Yes.
Okay. Page 11, there's three things on this page. Number one is the concept of design guidelines. I think this was the thing that got the most response from residents, that they think they care the most about. But there is some work going on in this area. Section 13 of Public Act 2129 required the legislature to establish a committee to look at issues such as this, and there is a subcommittee looking at the creation of statewide pattern book, which is really having to do with housing and housing design. So it's possible. Their work is supposed to be done by the end of 2022, or before the legislative session starts in 2023, but they can't ask for an extension if they feel they need it. But we could have a state design manual that we can use and point to, rather than create something ourselves. For example, in the town center area, we have design criteria, and we work with that. But if the state had a pattern book and you said, we're looking at this rather than that, it might give you some flexibility. So I think, I encourage you to keep this one in, kind of explore and see what happens. Design is an area, an 830G application, you do not have as much room as you do on other types of situations. But I've never met an applicant who doesn't want an approval. So the question is, how can we navigate towards a solution which is design, considerate, design friendly for Rocky Hill?
Now, doesn't that go contrary to the requirement in that same public act that you cannot consider characteristic or character?
Yeah, so I think,
Community character versus physical site character.
Right, so
That's,
you can
that's
only
2129.
you can look at physical character, but you cannot say, well, next door building is such, so do something like this, you know.
so I think the section of Public Act 2129, I think what they were trying to get to was the idea that you can't use character to deny an 830J. Okay? That's sort of the simple, frank reality of it. But their solution was to basically expunge the word character or community character from the statutes and replace it with physical site characteristics. So it's a very similar concept. but I think you have to work a little harder at it to describe what it is that you mean.
Right.
So I think this is an area that's going to settle out over the next year or two in terms of what this really does mean. But I think realistically, if the state comes up with a pattern book, as the Public Act tells them to,
Then that
and it
goes.
gives us an opportunity to look at that and decide if there are ways that we could use that effectively.
Glenn, what's interesting about that, though, is they came up with a new term, and then they didn't define it.
Which one's that, the physical site?
Physical site characteristics. So now it seems a bit arbitrary and capricious to just put it there and then not define it. I mean, because somebody could take that too far, or somebody could not take it far enough. But the point is, they didn't define it.
Yeah, and I think,
This is something that I was going to mention, is they put out the word character, but character has 4 or 5 different definitions. Which definition are they using as character in this Public Act?
and I think
Gotta be,
in all my work on town plans over the years, character has sort of been the #1 thing that residents care about. In other words, it's the feeling and ambiance of a community that makes it feel like home to them. So I agree that when we're talking about housing for low or moderate income people, using character as a way to say, we're not gonna do this because that doesn't fit into the character of our town, needs to change, no question. But to take character out, like it's a swear word or something, to me, was overly aggressive. But the Public Act was created. We got to figure out now what all of that's going to mean. I would suggest that character can probably still stay in a POCD, but the word character should not appear in your zoning regulations.
Yep.
So, Section 5.5 is sort of supportive efforts. Fair Rent Commission, the Commission on Inclusion and Innovation, to monitor situations. There are situations where former lodging facilities are being used for more and more permanent housing, and that can have long-term impacts. Elderly tax relief, social services, helping people aging in place, and then also 5.6, which is supportive regional efforts. Emergency shelters, homelessness, et cetera.
What can we achieve from monitoring former lodging facilities being used for housing? Because, there are probably a number of affordable rents in those units, but what?
I think just to keep an eye on those over time, because generally speaking, the economics of the development get to a point where that becomes a viable business model for the owners, but its long-term impact on the community. I know that Newington has struggled with this a little bit on the Berlin Turnpike and some other places, so it's just something to monitor, I think. They actually established a task force in Newington multi-departmental to try to deal with the issues that were happening related to this. So I think an ounce of prevention could be worth a pound of cure, so I think monitor is the operative verb there.
So when we talk about regional, I'm just thinking out loud, can we meet with Berlin and say, hey, you know what, now you got 15%, we got 5%, we combine, so it's 10 and 10%. It's a regional.
I don't think it works
There's
that
been
way.
quite a bit of controversy in the state because the WestCog affordable housing plan suggested that.
Okay.
Nice try.
It hasn't been well received in terms of a concept, but I think there's so many things that go on in the housing area that don't stop at town lines.
Right.
So for some of the communities I've had a chance to work on, the housing-related knowledge or information that needs to happen isn't something that, Kim, with all of her years of experience, is not necessarily dealt with on a regular basis, and there are intricacies in it. But what if CROG had a regional housing technician, or whatever we might call this person, who could assist all of the, I think it's 31 towns in the CROG region now. And so when there are questions related to, hang on a second, how do I account for this in calculating income, or does this sale price comply with the most recent data? You don't have to do the math yourself. You've got somebody who's an expert on it, and that's could be a wonderful addition for CROG to do. So, or just cooperating on social service functions or other types of things. I think there are opportunities for regional exploration as opposed to every town doing it themselves. So I don't know what all of those are, but I think saying let's explore that is probably a good thing.
It's like everybody using Hartford roads and things like that, and then they leave, right? So who maintains the roadways? It's Hartford, but do they get benefit? It's not. So I think that kind of stuff is like, if there is a road going through another town that has affordable housing and they're all using this road that impacts the other community,
Well, and in terms of the services and everything else that go on are part and parcel of this.
Yep.
So I think I've completed most of my work with you this evening. Thank you. My next job, I believe, is to start to put together a plan. We're not envisioning a long plan. We're probably something, we're gonna, 20-page range is where I'm gonna try to be. This document itself here is about 20 pages, but that's because the remaining pages in this booklet are a glossary of some housing-related terms. Those don't necessarily have to go in the plan, but I think the idea would be that this is helpful information if you want to know about it. It could be an appendix, or it could be separate, or whatever. So thank you for your work. I expect to be back before you, probably about 60 days. And before that meeting, you'll get a first draft of a plan for me, from me. We'll talk it through. At some point in time, we'll have a public informational meeting to get feedback from people in person as to what they think about our strategies, and then move towards, I think, adoption. I think we're projecting sometime by the end of October. So I think we're on track to do that, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
just one, are there any other communities nearby who has already adopted?
Yeah.
Is that?
Pretty sure Berlin has. I worked with Newington, I worked with South Windsor, I worked with Glastonbury. Everybody's required to do it. OPM actually has a database on their website that shows you who got done, or who's still working on it, or whatever.
Maybe we can just look at theirs and see what's out there in
Yeah.
terms of strategies and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There aren't that many strategies when you're dealing with an issue like housing affordability. The challenge in many communities in Connecticut is that we're starting from scratch. So we don't have a committee yet. We don't have a housing fund yet. We don't have a standard housing affordability. So getting those basics out of the way will now allow us to focus our efforts in the future. And again, the plan needs to be updated every 5 years. So that's gonna, before we know it, it'll be time to create the next one. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 5A, bylaws. This has been going on for.
This has been going on a while now.
Yes.
I'd say too long now.
And-
And there were some changes in here, and those have been incorporated. They were last time in draft form, so you could see the old language versus the new language. This takes those away and just has the wording in here as if there were no changes. I know Alan had made mention something at the last meeting about the bylaws. I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, well, we discussed the specifics. I mentioned, in fact, I had the agenda, the actions from the May meeting, where everybody seemed to agree that we put in wording that states something to the effect, it's on page 5 of the May 18th minutes. Let me see if I can find it. I had it, but it was open so long it got closed. I suggested another change stating that if the commissioner of one party is absent, we can figure better wording to use, because I don't like using party in bylaws. The alternate should be from the same party if possible. And everybody seemed to agree with that, but I don't see it in your, in the thing that you sent us this week. So I'll just reference page, in item 6 on page 5 of the May 18th minutes, so you can look at that and maybe incorporate it.
But I think it's, I think it may create an issue in the sense that there were alternate from one party who was present for all the public hearings or whatever. And the other alternate that we are talking about to replace may not have, attended those meetings. So requiring that
Correct.
particular, alternate be a regular member, not even attended meetings, we
But
don't know.
yeah,
I mean, those, so I think,
I mean, we can talk about 20 different possibilities, but
Right.
where I said where possible. Now, obviously, the example you're giving us is that, okay, that can't happen. But I'd say in like 80% of the times that a regular member is absent, the alternate from the same side or group, let me say that. I hate using the word party here because it's just the way the country's working. The alternate from the same side is there. And like an example was, I believe back in like March or so, I left the meeting a half an hour before it ended. And we had Commissioner Brescia there, who was an alternate, but she wasn't chosen to replace me for the last vote or two, like probably just a motion to adjourn. But logically, one would think that that person would have sat in for me for that last period of time, but it didn't happen. I mean, she was sitting there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and she just got skipped right over. And I'm not saying that specifically about her, but the same thing on the, for your alternates. I don't see why it's, actually, the way the bylaws are written, I'm really amazed that they're written that way, where they say go through the attendance records, this, that, and the other. You don't have the attendance records in front of you when an alternate needs to be chosen for a specific agenda item or a hearing or whatever. So that's my point. And everybody seemed to agree with that back in May, or nobody objected to it, let me put it that way. In fact, the minutes read, Mrs. Ritchie said she would make that change and the bylaws would be on the agenda for the next month for approval. But that change wasn't made. And that's what I'm saying tonight.
Trying to see where the change was.
Yeah, it became unbalanced. It was maybe it was a mistake, but Ellen left, and then you took the alternate Republican instead of the alternate Democrat. So, in order to maintain a balance, it should have gone to Nancy. But on the
There's
fly,
a reason why there are alternates from both parties.
that's what happened in that. It's in the minutes.
so,
So there does have to be some kind of a balance, I mean, and you already have the majority. So now you have the majority of the majority.
no, I mean,
Not that it ever becomes a factor or a factor very often, but I'm just looking at it in the sense of fairness, that we get an alternate that sits in on every meeting, and then all of a sudden there's an opportunity or an instance where an alternate is required, and the alternate's just passed over for some reason. And I don't think anybody took any attendance records that night. And that's just an example that made me want to bring this up, since we are revising the bylaws or amending the bylaws.
I mean, we don't even have a.
so Kim, why don't we do this? Let's see what we have, even for wetlands and any other commissions. And
Yeah,
see
the thing
what
is, we
type
don't,
of-
granted, commissions are appointed by political party. I understand that. Commissions should not be political or politicized. I get that
Correct.
too. I know what you're saying, and I know in the past, what they would do is This week, if we need an alternate, it's that side. Next month, we need an alternate, it's this side. Next month, it's that, so they would alternate every month if an alternate was needed, or whenever an alternate was needed. What you're saying is if from one party, I mean, that's the way it is. That's the way the commissions are appointed. So let's just say that. So if you're saying if a Democrat or a Republican is absent, a regular member is absent, then the respective party's alternate should be seated for that individual.
That's basically what I'm saying. And I'll just say that in the 4 years that I was a chairman, for the most part, because we had some alternates that didn't show up for every meeting, not that it was all bad, but for the most part, I chose an alternate from the side of the missing permanent member. I mean, it's just a logical thing to do, to me.
And I don't think
I don't know that it's.
I don't think I disagree with that. I mean, and to be honest, I don't recall like when that was done. I'll have to go back to those meeting minutes, see what happened. Do you recall, I mean, was it this year or was it before, or, I mean.
I'm not sure. It's 5 or 6 months ago. But the fact is, regardless of when that specific incident happened, it just is logical that we seat an alternate member.
The representative party.
As I laid it out.
Alan, this is Victor. When we went over this before, we actually came up with some verbiage, didn't we? I thought?
Yeah, right. In fact, it's in the minutes, the May 18th meeting.
It eliminated the party, right?
No.
I'm sorry?
It eliminated the party language, because we were adamant to talk about,
Could you get that?
just like you said, we hate to bring the quote-unquote party into it.
Correct, yeah, that's
I thought we came up with something.
terrible.
I thought we came up with something.
Eileen is coming
Well,
up
the
with the
minutes
main.
didn't say that. This is what the minutes read. I suggested another change of bylaws stating that if a commissioner of one party, and we went around and tried to figure out wording to eliminate the word party, because we have too much of that in this country right now. But just since we don't have the word at the tip of my tongue, if a commissioner of one party is absent, the alternate should be from the same party if possible. And I don't see why that.
I think the if possible is fine, because,
But that wasn't put into the.
I know. I apologize. I didn't do it. I will get to it. I will do it.
Okay.
All right.
It wasn't intentional not to do it.
I'm not saying it was,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that it hasn't been done, and we haven't talked about this. That was back in May, and we're June, July.
For an absent.
June. That was 2 months ago. So
Alternate is asked to sit for an
But the good thing is that the bylaws haven't been revised in probably about 10, 12 years anyway. So it's not like we're slacking.
And I think we also wanted to, I mean, not now, I mean, I have gone on, Zoom, you have gone on Zoom. So we want to make sure that there is some language, that under only strenuous circumstances, we, use like Zoom meeting. Like I was out of state. I wasn't here, so. And I wanted to attend the meeting, so that's why we went through. And, we had a sitting chair there, and I was, on the side. So I think we want to make sure that should not become the norm where, now people are saying, hey, you know what, hey, I want to, I don't want to attend, I'm going to attend from home. And,
I believe the state legislature and Governor Lamont put out a directive on how that should be handled. Is that correct, Kim? I'm not sure.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I
And
think
you
that
can,
is, yeah.
you can do
So we
this,
should probably,
but this isn't
So I don't
going to
think-
be the norm forever, that
Right.
you have the
Right.
ability to do Zoom meetings.
yeah, so I don't think that should be in the bylaws. I think that should be a policy adopted by the town council and the state legislature.
Yeah, because we will not be, I mean, we will be holding in-person meetings, and it's the exception rather than the norm where you can go and if you have either a health issue or you're out of state, whatever,
mean, it's-
you are allowed to do that, but that's only for a certain period of time. That will cease, and then we will only be
Yeah,
doing
someday,
in-person meetings.
6 months from now,
Yeah.
it'll be over. But, so that, I don't know that that has to be part of the bylaws, which,
Yeah.
you know, the
I
bylaws
agree
are
with
the way
you.
the actual commission operates.
Yeah, I totally agree with you,
Okay,
Alan.
so as far as, so I think as far as there's an understanding, you know, at least on the commission. I mean, we don't care about what other commissions does, but at least here, you know, we just want to make sure that we are all here and, you know.
Yeah, we follow the guidelines
Yep.
as set forth by the town and, like I said, the legislature.
So with respect to the alternate members, if it just states, whenever an alternate member is asked to sit for an absent member, said alternate member of the same party, when possible, shall act in the capacity of that absent member throughout the duration of the meeting.
That sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, it seems.
Okay. Put that with this.
Is there?
What she just read is here.
Pardon?
What you just said is here,
Swear.
page 3.
Did I miss that?
It's the last, end of the first paragraph in page 3.
But
Whenever
it
an alternate
doesn't
member is
talk
asked
about-
to sit for an absent member, said the alternate member shall act in the capacity of member throughout the duration of the meeting.
But it doesn't say
Right.
of the same party.
Of this, oh, okay, there you go.
It doesn't say how that alternate is
Yeah.
chosen.
No,
When possible,
Yep.
shall act in the capacity of that absent.
Yeah, I mean,
member.
it's obvious that, you know, we may have alternates that are absent themselves, so we want to fill up the 5 spots as best we can.
And I don't think we can get away or around not using the word party or political party.
Yeah, I know. I wish there would be.
Or you
there
could
was a
say
way.
alternate member of the same
Represented
majority
party.
or minority. I don't know.
That'd be good.
I think
That'd
this
be a
is.
good way of putting it.
I don't know, it's the same thing,
Yeah.
same
Same
thing.
thing.
We'll just say it like it
Can't
is.
hide it.
Let's just say it like it is.
Bingo.
Okay.
Anybody else, I'll say it's Alan.
And can we all agree that this is the only change that needs to be made, and next time if it's in there, this is a done deal?
Can we do
Can we
that,
all, like, vote or say something that this is the end?
please?
Well, there's still one thing I brought up at the last meeting that it was a question.
But there was
The
nothing-
24-hour notice, it's still 24. Was that?
You can
it's
have,
just-
I mean, you can have an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice.
Yeah, yeah,
Know
it's
that
just the
this
reality
commission will
of it. It's
Will
just,
ever have it.
yeah.
I don't see that happening. I see if we have on our schedule the third and fourth Wednesdays of the month. Typically, we don't meet on the fourth, but I always set it aside in case we need to, or in case something comes up. So could that be an emergency meeting? Yes, it could. Would you typically have 24 hours notice? No. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, so it's not less than so.
Yeah, I was just, I just said that maybe it should be 48, and I thought I saw some people nodding, but I'm not gonna sweat it.
All right, so there's
And I
only
think we
one
also-
change, and we move on.
I think we also said that the reason for the special meeting should be clearly specified.
Yeah, but there can't be any secret clandestine meeting, it has to be.
No, you'd have to know what the special meeting is about, obviously.
Yeah, and again, I
And the
think,
reason for it.
again, I think everybody on the commission has to understand, it just, the chairperson alone or vice chair or whoever doesn't make the decision and say, let's have meeting next week. Town staff is involved, and town staff generates and starts that communication. So the process is, I want to make it clear, the process is that it comes from town staff. It does not come from the chair. Town staff takes the lead based on what they receive and what the needs are, and they communicate with the chair.
What the needs are, that's the important
Yes,
thing.
and that was communicated. So I think, again, I don't know, we are stuck on that thing, and there was nothing there. It was town staff who initiated that process. And that's how it was done.
Well,
So if you are saying that there should be a reason, there was a reason, and town staff did it. And Kim is here, I mean.
Yeah, I wasn't talking any specifics. I was.
Right, no, but I think I think the conversation is going to another where, well, you know, there should be a reason why there should be a special
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, there always is a reason for a special
There's always a
meeting.
reason, and
Yes.
that comes from staff.
Yes.
I think staff is taking the
I
lead.
know of what is being spoken,
Right.
and that's, once again, that was with February. February is a short month.
Yep.
And when you have a short month in February, and you have a 21-day deadline prior to the meeting, I mean, we're not getting into the weeds here.
Yeah. That was.
Yeah,
And
let's
there's
not go
statutory
through that again.
requirements. If there's statutory requirements of a 35-day notice, obviously there has to be a change into the meeting schedule. Special meetings usually are for public hearings, but that's something that you would more than likely know about. Say, for example, we had something you didn't have a public hearing scheduled for. It wasn't a mandatory public hearing, and for some reason you wanted a public hearing, then we may have to schedule a special meeting. Town attorney needs an executive session for something.
It's a special,
You know, affordable housing plan, so.
All right, I think we have discussed this enough. I think that's been going on. So we'll make that one change, as you said, and is everybody in agreement? Say, you know, we are all in agreement with that change, and next time we'll make sure that we have the bylaws.
at least before Christmas, anyway.
Huh?
We don't have to
I
do a
doubt
motion,
it.
do we?
No.
Not yet?
No.
All right, making sure.
We just want to make sure everybody agrees, you know.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, next,
Enforcement.
enforcement, any,
We're getting a lot of, right now, we're dealing with a lot of tall grass complaints and blight complaints. We have, as I mentioned to Glenn, a lot of foreclosures. We have a lot of, what we're finding now is a lot of properties where people just don't live there. They're still paying the taxes, but they choose not to live in the home. They're maintaining the lawn, they hire people to mow the lawn, they're not living in the house. Technically, the house is abandoned, but they're mowing the front lawn, because the front lawn, you know, people see the front lawn. So we're dealing with a lot of odd issues, trying to track down property owners. In some instances, we've had the state marshals track down property owners for citations and things, so that's what we're dealing with. One of the issues with respect to zoning enforcement and discussions that had come up in the past were the electronic vehicle charging stations. I know Victor mentioned something about that. We happened to get a zoning referral that came over through the Capital Region Council of Governments, and Cromwell actually has a regulation before them for electronic vehicle charging stations, which was basically, this was taken, I believe, from Middletown. So I guess this seems to be the going thing, so I've included it in the packet for you to at least look at. We're getting requests all the time for these. Some of them have movie screens on them where they actually have advertisements, And you see the sign for Gugliotti's on the Solacene Highway, it's a hair salon location. They received a zoning variance for that sign. That's not something we would allow under our regulations without a zoning variance. Many of these requests come in for electronic vehicle stations with those types of signs on there, and we don't allow that. So,
What would be the process to get ours going?
to get that going, it's a zoning regulation amendment.
That's all it is?
Yeah, zoning reg amendment.
I mean,
And we can certainly do that.
After seeing that
'cause we would
Tesla
like-
station out there in
Yes, we
Route
would like
3,
to, we would like to,
should probably do something.
yeah. And it's hard with respect to design, because there's things coming in now where they may be out of the way, but depending on where they're located, you need safety bollards, because you have all the mechanical
All the site plan
equipment.
stuff that we always look at.
Yeah, so,
So Kim, the ones they just placed on Route 3 wouldn't look so bad if they didn't put those big transformer pads behind them.
well, and they all need
That's
that.
their model.
They need that, though.
Why couldn't they just move?
It's their model, though. And we have no,
They need
can't
that,
say
though.
anything, that's their model.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they need all that ancillary equipment to go with this. We have another,
The service doesn't come to the building, the service comes to
Right, I
the
just,
street.
I
yes,
would think.
we have another request in before staff now, and one of my things is when you drive into this plaza, that's the first thing you see. And it makes no sense where it's located. But, so we're working with them on that. But I agree, we need something in
That and
place.
sidewalks.
And a
That
sidewalk.
ordinance, I don't
and
know
a-
where that is, but.
Yes. Mhm. We have a change in administration now, so.
All right.
Mhm.
Minor modification.
I don't think we had any.
Okay. Planning Implementation Committee.
We need a meeting.
I don't know if,
What is that? We need a meeting.
I think,
We need a meeting.
yeah, we need a meeting. I think it was scheduled and then something else came up, we pushed it, so we'll set a meeting.
When was the last meeting?
Oh, my God, it's been
Last
a
year.
while.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
last year or no, early
It
this
was
year?
on Zoom.
Early
Last
this
meeting
year?
was-
Yes, it was on Zoom. Yeah. Was it on Zoom?
I believe so.
Because I know we sat in the
Oh,
back, and
I
we
missed
had.
it. I missed that when I was.
No,
away.
because we had a request, because I know that they're working on the plan. There was a woman that was at that meeting about sidewalks and a study in the Century Hills area about sidewalks. And there's a plan being worked on even as we speak.
Down in Gloucester Avenue.
To do that, yeah.
Legislation? Nothing,
No.
all right. Communication, nothing.
I already mentioned the electrical, the vehicle charging stations. Ed Ciccarello is doing Historical Society kiosks once again on, he did 3 around Academy Hall Museum, and they're looking to do others in the area. Methodist Church, 9/11 Memorial, the Library, Fire Museum, and Congregational Church. That's just an FYI.
All right, item 7, approved bills. We have one bill,
One bill.
so.
Motion to approve invoice 1908 for the Affordable Housing Plan on Planometrics for $3,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Hold on. Alan, you have something?
Yeah, one of the great things about having a bad back and sitting at home is I have access to the town website. The last
PUs.
Plan Implementation Committee meeting that has
Last year.
approved approved minutes was back in 2019. It looks like there may have been one in
we
March.
had it.
We've had one
We had-
since
No,
then.
we've had them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me finish. I said, I was saying, it looks like there was one in March of 2022, but since there hasn't been a subsequent meeting, there haven't been approved minutes yet. so,
No, so,
but anyhow, just
yes. So
bring
that
up to date.
information is not correct.
I'm
All
sorry?
right. All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Good night, Alan.